what people are saying.
Derek, we're ready. I heard that she just got like anxious and did you ask?
And I just,
Which sounds like her.
it's reminiscent of the general in Vietnam who said that we needed to destroy the town to save it.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Mike.
She did on some.
Okay.
Is that right?
I don't think my mic.
I
Can you
go
guys
to
hear me?
When are we
She said, I know you
talking
weren't
about Sharp
last
Field?
year.
Hello?
That was
All right, awesome.
October 2019, and then I hit her up.
All right, welcome,
I was
everyone.
You're for it, right?
I like wanted to know.
I don't have enough information.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's,
But like,
we need it.
actually, I guess,
And I think,
I think it's, there's a
Ready?
2-year gap.
yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Fair enough. All right. Welcome, everyone, to the March 21st, 2022, thank you, Board of Directors meeting for MSAD 51. We have all sorts of people here in our audience tonight, and I want to first say that thank you to Town of Cumberland and Town of North Yarmouth for joining us tonight to listen to our budget presentation. Hope this becomes a more regular thing. And when I invited you, I said that I would promise to invite you to something more entertaining at the GCA. And so as a taste of that, we will give you a piece from our upcoming theater show, Rent, that's being produced by our students this evening. So they are going to sing a song for all of us this evening. So I would welcome Dr. Patterson to the podium to introduce your students and give us a little bit of information about how we can see the show.
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you so much for having us. We're really excited to be here. These kids have been working amazingly hard for the last any number of weeks, and they will continue to work hard for the next 3 weeks until we open. In 1896, Italian composer Giacomo Puccini premiered his opera La Boheme, the Bohemian. Since then, Boheme has become a staple of the canon of Western opera, and for good reason. Boheme tells the story of a small group of young artists in Paris struggling to survive and thrive in a bleak environment of poverty, in a society in which artists were marginalized, and there was a terrifying disease, tuberculosis, that ravaged the city's most vulnerable. 100 years later, American composer Jonathan Larson took Puccini's characters and story and used them to create the contemporary rock musical Rent. Just as Boheme reflected Puccini's world, so too does Rent reflect Larson's. The world of New York City in the early 1990s, in the early days of AIDS, another terrifying disease that targeted some of the city's most marginalized citizens. And now, 25 years after Rent's premiere, I can think of no better time than right now to be producing this play in America. Because in as much as Rent deals with issues of addiction and homelessness and poverty and racism and homophobia, it is all about friendship and what makes a family. And at its core, it is absolutely, most of all, about love. Rent is about love over hate, love over fear, love over everything. Thank you so much again for allowing us to share with you just a bit of what we've been working on. And please welcome this group of young artists as they perform Seasons of Love from Rent. Thank you.
thank you so much. We continue to try to open these meetings with students, and I think we're onto something good. So, students, you were awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, into more business things. We need a motion for the March 7th, 2022 approval of minutes.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All approved, or all in favor? Thank you. And then a motion for the March 7th, 2022 regular meeting?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. All right, we will then move into communications. I don't have anything, but I believe Mike Williams was going to share something tonight.
I do. Thank you, Tyler. I wanted to note that at the Cumberland Town Council meeting last week, there was a discussion about doing some work jointly with the town of Cumberland, the town of North Yarmouth, and the district, MSAD 51, on a project to build a solar project that would potentially provide power to the whole campus. It would meet the climate commitments in the town of Cumberland. It meets sustainability commitments within North Yarmouth. It certainly would meet goals that we've laid out in MSAD 51. There's 2 letters conceivably that are coming towards us. The town of Cumberland voted on them, and it's to encourage us to work jointly. The main thrust of it, to come up with a plan to build this project. Not necessarily just to figure out how to put solar on a new project. This is about the energy system as a whole, the electricity system at MSAD 51. And so one of the really good ideas that came from it, and my significant kudos to the town council, is to create a committee with representatives from the towns of North Yarmouth, Cumberland, and the district, so the boards, and the select board, the council, and the MSAD 51 board. And so it's a wonderful idea. I watched and applauded when I was at the council meeting last week, and I think we should take them up on that. So I'm going to offer a motion during the items for action that the MSAD 51 board would commit to working with the towns of Cumberland and North Yarmouth to create a board to explore this idea. I'm happy to answer questions or what have you.
Anyone have any questions or anything? Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I'd be happy to serve on that board.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you. I think it's not an unknown thing that we don't have a lot of capacity for new projects right now. So having the ability to partner with towns and also use the expertise that was done through community members through the farm that's already in town for Cumberland's use, just seems like a really efficient way to do it. So thank you to those that have started the conversation, that are supporting the district in that. And I fully support that resolution. So thank you.
One minor thing.
Go ahead.
About 3 weeks ago, the French field trip came under, the viability of it came under pressure when a travel alert to France was issued by the State Department, and we were inundated probably with 30, 40 pieces of communication to see if we could solve it. Thanks to work that Jeff did with our council, we were able to devise a method where we were able to preserve the trip, and we've got a bunch of folks heading across the pond in April to do it. But I might add that, with all the inundation that we got to solve this thing, there was not one letter or email of thank you for the parents. And, we get all the time just requests from the public to do this, do that. We try our best, and I think common courtesy would have been at least one thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Peter.
On behalf of those students who are going to France, thank you.
And Peter, I apologize, I did receive a couple of thank yous that I thought went to the board, and I did not look
Yeah,
to
they
see.
didn't go.
So I apologize if those didn't get passed along.
So, nobody's paying attention because I skipped public comment. So, if anybody would like to speak to public comment, you're welcome to approach the podium. I'm not seeing anyone stepping up at the moment. We'll have some discussion during. Oh, I do. Oh, thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'll be real quick. My name is Amber Harrington, and I am a resident. I have 2 students in district, and I just really wanted to come here to point you to the email that I sent last night in support of the TURF program that I firmly believe in, and if you have any questions, please let me know, but I just wanted to show up and offer my support. I know there are other people, but they unfortunately couldn't make it tonight. So, thank you, and thank you again for all of your work.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. All right, so we'll move into presentations. Our first presentation is from Mr. Gray regarding junior privileges.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Porter, and Mr. Poulin. I know you have at least one board member I think that's probably going to be in favor of this proposal. So actually, I have to say, Mia Netland is from student government. She's a senior, and we've been working with student government to develop what we think might work for junior privileges. And so she's really going to do the presentation here this evening, and I'm just going to be here to support her and ask questions if any should arise. So with that, I think she's trying to connect. Connect to GCA Mobile. We're almost there.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
Apologies, I'm trying to make that as visible as possible.
We can read it. We can see it here too in front of us.
Yeah, mainly just for the audience members. But all right, thank you, Mr. Gray, and thank you to the board members for inviting me to speak on behalf of our student government. So, junior privileges is a liberty that many other schools in the state have already implemented. The students at Greeley, particularly sophomores and juniors, have brought up the prospect of integrating a similar policy at GHS for years now. And in the interest of listening to our student body, student government has been working in the past few months to create a drafted proposal. So the proposed junior privileges would be a Q4 opportunity for students of high academic standing to experience the privileges they will likely be allotted as seniors. Key benefits of junior privileges include less on-campus traffic, more open parking spaces, and that it serves as a sort of introductory period before they're given sort of full all-access privileges when they are seniors. This will allow juniors to assimilate to the new responsibilities and requirements for time management that come with these off-campus privileges, while at the same time not downgrading the importance of earning these privileges as seniors. If passed in time, then Q4 of this school year would mark the first trial period for junior privileges at Greeley. So before I continue into the logistics, are there any questions on the basics of junior privileges?
Could you just tilt the mic a little bit towards you?
Sure, I'm sorry, I'm short. All right. If there are none, then I will continue. So junior privileges would function with the same requirements and expectations as senior privileges, and we have also added some additional higher qualifications. So as always, requirements such as parental sign-off would be required, but some changes would include things like a school counselor sign-off, that the student is on track for their graduation credits. Another change has been raising the minimum quarter grade from 80, which is the requirement for seniors, to 85. There would also be a mid-quarter grade check in addition to an end-of-the-quarter grade check. With that being said, this is also not a completely finalized proposal. Logistics such as access to key cards that allow students to enter the building without secretaries buzzing them in are still being discussed. At the bottom of the proposal, I have noted the separate policies in each scenario, and I've discussed both with Mr. Gray. At the core, we do not wish to overwhelm any faculty members due to enacting this new policy, which is why the proposal only allows junior privileges during the final quarter to serve as an introductory and, for this year, a testing period for newfound off-campus privileges for juniors. Any questions?
The only question I have is the things that are not complete, like the access to in and out of the building, is that going to prevent you from starting this year?
I wouldn't say that's a prevention. It's more so gaining the numbers for the things like key cards. It's more so about the lack of key cards. So all we have right now is the key cards for seniors. We do have some available because, for example, there are seniors who have graduated early, so those would also be accessible. But for additional key cards, those would have to be purchased by the juniors if they actually qualify for the privileges.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah.
So if this is enacted for Q4, would it be that you'd have to get your paperwork in by a certain date so you can qualify for this? Is that what you're looking for with enough time right now that, what would Q4 start after April vacation?
Yeah, so we were hoping to introduce this a little bit earlier so that there was more time. However, as we're introducing it right now, if we were to do an introductory period this year, it would be more so later in the quarter, a couple weeks into the quarter. Usually it takes a while to get the numbers, see how many juniors actually qualify.
Right.
So yes, it would take some time.
Okay. And then the thought is that if this trial period goes well, that it would be implemented for juniors starting in September when we return to school?
Yeah, exactly. And the other idea is that as we're testing this process, originally what was proposed was that it would be during second semester, but we narrowed it down to fourth quarter. So there's a possibility that that could change in the future, but we think that for this being the first type of policy at Greeley High School, we should start small.
I think this policy is great. I like the fact that you up the standards for juniors, just because you would hate for a student to get into trouble of graduating or get behind in their studies because they're given a little bit more freedom or coming and going off campus. So thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Yes. I don't know if this is necessarily a question or maybe an idea. Would it be better to not give juniors key cards at all? Because I know that I, as a senior, have definitely forgotten to check myself in and out of the school. But when you have to actually buzz into the school, it's like kind of more of a forced idea. Would it potentially be easier to just make them not do it at all and be like, hey, make sure that you scan when you come in? But
that's certainly something that could be discussed. Again, that there's sort of a gray area with the key cards right now. The main reason is that we're just not sure if there's enough. But I would say personally, I've lost my key card once, and that was as a senior. But I don't necessarily think that would be a huge issue. But again, I think that's something that could be discussed.
You're good. Go ahead. Okay. Do you have any is there further parts to your presentation?
If there are no other questions or concerns, then that is it.
Thank you.
I want to recognize you that you are a senior, correct?
Yes.
So these privileges do not affect you personally.
No, it would not affect
So
you.
I hope your peers thank you for all the work that you've done over the past year and a half for their privileges.
Thank
That's
you.
pretty awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you to Mia for the presentation as well, but I've also been to a couple of the listening forums that she's hosted as student government president, and they're really well done, and Mia, great job presenting that information.
And I'll just follow up by saying thank you, Mia. And as you can see, Mia doesn't need a lot of support. She leads from the front, so thank you, Mia.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. All right, so we will have a motion on that later this evening. We can have some discussion then, if that feels all right. So we'll move into our next presentation from Superintendent Porter on the 2022-2023 budget. And what we'll do is we'll have our presentation, I'll allow the board to ask questions, discuss, and then I have communicated with the towns that if the chairs want to come up and ask a few questions to Jeff and Scott, you're more than welcome to. We may not have all the answers right now, but we want to make sure we understand your questions so we can answer them later, if not tonight.
All right, good evening. I'm here to present the annual budget, and I'd like to say that this is Mr. Pullen's favorite time of the year. It's like the holidays for people who enjoy numbers as much as Mr. Pullen does, and we may not have a presentation at this point if it loads. Keeps loading. I believe it's loading. Try that again. So this is the FY23, we're turning the page, looking at fiscal year 22-23. And as we look at the budget for next year, we want to start obviously with where is our district at? Our district is obviously a high-performing school district. Schools are more than just something that we are looking to pay for as a community. Schools in any community are something obviously that we are looking to invest in. And these are current photos, and you can see there's going to be, in this presentation, there's a lot of photos that have masks, people wearing masks, and that's because this was prior to 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at this point, and then you'll see a couple that don't. So there's quite a sampling in here. And just to kind of recap where our statistics are, demographics, we currently have 2,102 students in the district, pre-K to 12. We have 422 regular employees. We have about 100 temporary employees beyond that. We have 2,660 parents and guardians, and that's because some parents have multiple children in the district. That's why we don't have, for example, 4,000 parents. Some have multiple. 93% is our high school completion rate. That's pretty consistent from year to year. Post-secondary enrollment is 90%. That's pretty consistent. 67% of our students are taking AP and IB courses. By the way, these statistics are either from June of this past year, June 21, class of June 21, which is high school completion and post-secondary enrollment. And then these other statistics are statistics from this school year. 12% of our students qualify for special education, 11% are on the Section 504 plan for academics or health, and 65% of our students are participating in athletics. That actually might be higher by the time we get through the spring season. Last year was a little bit lower than other years because of the hybrid. What is the value of the investment? So we don't just roll out a budget with numbers. We want to explain what is the purpose of our budget. Your school district has been consistently recognized for its academic, athletic, and arts accomplishments for many years. This is the school district of this community, both towns. Despite the pandemic, Greeley High School was named the #1 high school in Maine for the past 2 years in a row by U.S. News and World Report for its rigorous educational offerings and exemplary student performance. Our sports teams win multiple state and regional championship titles annually, and our arts programs are recognized as some of the finest in New England and beyond. Your district is always at the very top of any list of high-performing school systems in the state. Your investment is not made in vain, and you have much to be proud of. This is for everyone living here. Celebrate our students' success as if they were your own. And our tagline, one of our taglines is Rangers Lead the Way. The mascot is the Ranger. And we're guided by our mission. This mission statement has been in place for at least a dozen years now in our district to guide all students as they acquire enthusiasm for learning, assume responsibility for their education, achieve academic excellence, and discover and attain their personal best. And I think the last phrase is the one that I like to talk about the most, the personal best. And when we bring new teachers and staff into our district, we have an induction program that our staff participate in. And one of the sessions we actually go through that I've done in previous years is we go through the mission statement and really talk about what each of those phrases in the mission statement means to our new teachers in our district. And our district, our budget is based on the strategic plan. Obviously, as we know, for the past 2 years, some components of the strategic plan have been put on hold. And in its place on the right are the annual strategic priorities that have been developed in order to focus our efforts annually over the last 2 years and not look at our strategic plan as a 3 or 4 year plan, but more as a 12-month plan. So looking at the first section of the budget proposal tonight is expenditures. And these are all photos from this school year. So this was in the fall. It was obviously outside in the fall. And this was at our home football game. We had one home football game, I think it was the very end of August. As we build the budget for the SAD, there are 3 pieces to really look at. These are important. The foundation is 80% of our budget. We are a very labor-intensive organization in the sense that we employ a lot of personnel because the work we do is human-to-human interaction. So 80% of our budget is largely salaries and benefits. That's the lion's share of that 80%. We have debt service on our buildings, and then we have utility costs. Those utility costs, and we'll be talking about that in just a moment, are, just like at home, are doubling. And we anticipate that those utilities are really driving up part of our budget as everyone is realizing going into the next year. So the next part of the expenditure piece, I'm just going to go through each school very briefly. Mabel I. Wilson School, we currently have 713 students in that school. We're projecting anywhere from 760 to 770 students. Rebecca Wandell's latest enrollment report showed us having 770, and that really depends on our incoming kindergarten registrations. So in our budget, the new priorities, we have 2 classroom teachers because of the enrollment going from 713 to anywhere from 760 to 770. We need 2 additional classroom teachers. And all these numbers, that are personnel numbers, have benefits included. So when you see the cost, that's the all-in cost. We're not putting other money in other places. So for 2 teachers, it's $170,000 with benefits. We also need furniture for these 2 new classrooms. Again, this is all enrollment related, and these are all aligned to the strategic plan, which talks about early elementary education as one of the components of our strategic plan. This has been a request, the third item, a full-time math specialist, and you'll see this half-time position in 2 places, at the Wilson School and at GMS 4-5. That's why you'll see half-time here, and the other half-time is a full-time FTE. This is an ask that has been there for probably 3 years at least. The administrators have put that forward, and this year we felt the urgency, more of an urgency to put this forward as a strategic priority. If you remember Susie Robbins providing information on math scores in the fall, and also the results of the pandemic and some skills lagging, and also looking at our programming, in which is aligned to the Common Core. We feel that this position is now necessary. Again, a lot of these, the Wilson School are enrollment related. Point 2 in music, point 1 in art, and part of it is just the schedule, the way the schedule works. We have staff members who go between buildings, and depending on the schedule and how many sections they have in each building is dependent on what point of an FTE we need in order to cover those additional 2 classrooms. This school is also growing rapidly. It had 540 students in 2015, and today, 7 years later, it will have 770 students projected. That's a significant enrollment shift. We have added no clerical support to this building during those years, with 220 or 230 students being added to the school. The principal at Wilson requested a full-time FTE for a secretary, and we were able to at least look at a half-time position at that school for safety reasons. And again, that's enrollment dependent. And finally, point 1, school counselor, again, this is enrollment dependent at the school. So for $275,500 in new requests or priorities at the Wilson School. At Greeley Middle School 4-5, again, there's the other half of that math specialist, so this will be a full-time FTE that will be working between grades 3 and we're trying to keep those class sizes down. This would keep our numbers down to 20s and 21s by having this additional teacher for next year and carrying that position. We feel coming out of the pandemic that it's critical. It's not the 4 teachers that we have this year on 1-year onlys. We're just carrying 1 of those 4, but it is important to keep our class sizes at least down a little bit going into the next year. And then cafeteria tables, you'll see those at $3,500. We're trying to replace all the cafeteria tables at the middle school. A lot of them are chipped, and the building's been open for 16, 17 years now. They're wearing down. So the new priorities for grades 4-5 are $131,000. Greeley Middle School 6-8, again, for class size reduction, there were 3 1-year onlys this year at the 6-8 level, and we are requesting 1 position. And also, that's the other part of the furniture. We usually, at that building, because there's 2 schools in 1 facility, often the common areas for equipment, et cetera, are shared by the 2 schools. So we put them in both places. So $88,500 is new request at GMS 6-8. Their enrollment is 464, and they're projecting 481. We're projecting 481 based on Rebecca Wendell's projections from December 2021. Greeley High School, enrollment of 602 currently, and we're projecting a slight drop next year, 594. One of the trends in our district that we have been seeing is that we're exiting larger classes that were at the older grades. We have more average classes in the middle, and we're bringing in very large classes to replace those classes that are going on at the high school at the primary school level. And that's where the projections are showing us that we're going to be continuing to grow as we have for the last 3 or 4 years. At Greeley High School, our priorities that we're putting forward is a half-time art teacher, $42,500. And that is because we have been oversubscribed in the art department for years and years. Students are on wait lists. They've been on wait lists. I think this has been the 3rd year now that we've had wait lists for art. Students really want those classes and are not getting into them. The other piece that we're not offering is a ceramics class at the high school, and this would open up that opportunity to do that as well and offer a new course. But we really have a huge wait list of kids that try to get into art classes. A very popular program there. 2 amazing art teachers, and just kind of drawing the kids in. Point 4 FTE English. This is a position that was added this year as part of the COVID adjustments. And this is a position that the high school felt very strongly about, keeping those English classes down. This was an area of our course studies where we would have larger class sizes, again, anywhere from 22 to 25 students in our English classes, and then trying to keep those English classes a little bit smaller, recommending that this 0.4 FTE in English continue permanently at this point. Summer credit recovery, we are beefing up our summer programming for students in order to recover credits in all the areas, English, math, social studies, and science, and also in visual and performing arts as needed. So that money will be additional money that we're putting into the budget so that students that need that, especially coming off of the pandemic, for students that are behind or are struggling in their coursework, they can take or if they failed a class or gotten a D, they can actually recover their credit or part of the credit and spend some of their summer doing that. Geometry and biology books, these are replacements. These are license replacements and book replacements at the same time. We have some of each, $70,000 between both of them. Math department spent a long time looking for a new geometry book. We actually came to the curriculum committee and discussed that proposal. It was heard by the curriculum committee, the process that they went through. They worked with the middle school teachers as well in formulating a geometry program that could be used all the way through. And I'm saying geometry and then I'm thinking it's algebra for some reason. I don't know why. Hoping it's geometry. Various furniture. We've been trying to purchase more standing desks. At the lower grades, I think we've done more of it. At the high school, they now are requesting more of that as well. We're really pushing that for students who it's very difficult to sit during an 82-minute block at the high school. We have them at the elementary and middle school levels now for students that like them or need to transition in and out of these. We have various seating options now. It's not your traditional classroom. We have kind of those padded big balls that you can sit on as well. Even some of our support staff use them like secretaries in offices. They're so popular, and we have a lot of students that like them and like to sit on them. So we're trying to offer different ways, and knowing that students are all different and need different ways that they can be sitting or standing in our classrooms, and that we need to be moving around. And then the other position at Greeley High School, and this has been an ask and on our list at least since I've been here, probably predates me. There's been 4 administrative teams now at the high school, 3 that I've worked with since I've been here, who have said the exact same thing without me leading, and that is that the workload at the high school for 2 administrators is just too much for this high school. The workload is just beyond what 2 people can really do. Conceivably, there are a lot of issues at any high school, and having 2 very busy administrators trying to handle everything at once is not feasible. And again, this is the 3rd administrative team that I've worked with since I've been here who have said the exact same thing. And I think if we don't want to burn out another administrative team, I think it's important to move forward on an assistant principal for student services. The notation is it's not $84,500, it's $129,000 is the all-in price with benefits. The $84,500 is looking at other things that we can consolidate, stipends that we have in place in the budget that can be rolled into this position and bring it down to $84,500. We stipend out a lot of things in order to help the 2 administrators, but it's still not nearly enough. We need a 3rd administrator at the high school level. So $247,500 is new strategic priorities at Greeley High School. Now transitioning to district services. The ALICE program is a safety program that actually we are trying to pay out of current year funds, so that $6,625 may end up being 0. If we can pull it off with end of the year funds, we'll try to do that. The ALICE School Safety Program has gone through the Safety Committee, the District Safety Committee, and the Safety Committee has been studying this For a long time, Mr. Gray, I don't believe is here at this point. He serves on the Safety Committee and has been very instrumental, along with Officer Owen from the Cumberland PD, have really been instrumental in bringing this program to fruition and getting our committee to be on board with that. Tom McGinnis is your member of the board that is also in the Safety Committee. 1.2 FTE nurses. These are, we're transitioning these over from ESSER funds. Some of it's enrollment, some of it is need-based, some of it is who knows what, I dare to say this, who knows what we'll be dealing with in terms of if there's a variant that sweeps through, our nurses are going to be involved in those things. We don't know if pool testing is something we're going to continue. We just know that we need to be prepared, and as our district grows, we want to make sure that we have the nursing support. We've had this nursing support for the last 2 years, and because we're losing those funds, because of federal funds drying up, and the ESSER funds no longer being in our district, we felt it was important to move this as a priority into the general fund. District Office Secretary, this is actually a budget to actual. This position has been in place since the summer. We have a heavy workload in the district office, and this position was, we have been doing a lot of trimming at the district office over the last few years, especially with support staff, but also administrative staff. And it got to the point where, especially during pandemic, we had trimmed way too much, and the workload was way too heavy. And so that position was reinstated, as most of you remember, back in the summer. So that's a budget to actual adjustment. Facilities truck is not actually $20,000. This is a brand new truck. That's the lease purchase amount. This facilities truck is one of our trucks that we plow the campus with, and it is on its very last leg. In fact, we were told that it will not make it through another winter for sure. And so it's extremely important that we have a truck. We have trucks that work and that can plow our campus. So that's the lease purchase amount. The next one is the district doctor stipend. Again, a budget to actual. We've been paying the district doctor a stipend. We did not have it budgeted for some reason, and well, I can tell you the reason. In the past, our district doctor has not been utilized that much, not the current one we have, but prior to COVID, the district doctor would just be on a retainer for a few phone calls a year from a nurse, and that was it. And they usually did that without charging us anything, or it was very minimal. Since COVID, we've had a heavy reliance on our district doctor, and so again, this is a small amount considering this person is a physician, but certainly giving way more than $3,500 worth of time to the district, and is also donating a lot of his time. But at least we wanted to pay some monetary value. We didn't have it in the budget because of that prior setup with our district doctor. A custodian, we have been putting custodians in the budget and then removing them from the budget. So we put it in the budget, and we actually removed this one from the budget. We actually had 2 in there originally, removed both of them. Then we went back through and said, no, we just don't have enough custodial staff. We have 21 classrooms right now outside of the main buildings. That's 21 classrooms outside the main buildings on our campus, and that is like another school. And we have not increased our custodial staffing to account for that. So our custodians are working extra hard to clean our modulars and the main buildings, and are just not able to keep up. So this custodian we felt was critical. Human resources specialist, we have 400. We do not have a dedicated HR person in our district. Mr. Poulin has 3 jobs. He's the director of finance, oversees a $44 million budget. He is the director of operations. He's in charge of transportation, food services. He's in charge of custodial and maintenance and anything else to do with operations. And he is the director of human resources. So he's not being replaced as the director of HR, not taking that away. We're simply giving him help, support. He needs it. We need it as a district. 422 regular employees. We also process paperwork. annually on 100 temporary employees, including substitutes, coaches, volunteers. Volunteers are not included in that, but we have volunteers that we're also on top of that. So we need more support in the HR area. We have a lot of staff, we have a lot of needs. There are areas that we're not able to get to because of that. So we're proposing this new position for a large organization. Legal fees, our legal fees have been climbing, partly because of legal cases that we're working through, but also because of legal fees, like everything else, is going up. And that's just an adjustment for next year. And then this is a huge cost, utilities. So like many people are experiencing it in their homes, we have looked, Ms. Pullen has taken a real good scouring across all of our utilities and looked at what some of our costs are coming in currently and then what they've projected, and making a good estimation. Hopefully he's usually right. 256,000 is about what we're estimating in additional utilities for expenses for next year. It's a huge nugget. I know everybody's dealing with that right now. So the total new priorities for the district are at $568,858 for the next fiscal year is our proposal. Our enrollment is going from 2102 to a projected 2152 next fall. During the finance development, the finance committee had a lot of discussions, lots of meetings to discuss staffing, especially around COVID staffing, and we put some information together. This is a summary of a lot of the information we discussed with the finance committee. But you'll see in the red 3 columns are positions that we have been carrying either through the ESSER funds or through our local contingency, which was the COVID contingency, $350,000 that voters approved through a warrant article last June. And we've been carrying 7 permanent substitute positions, lunch and recess duty aides, 5 one-year only teachers. Those are positions that we are not going to be continuing, that we're not recommending be continued for next year. Those were essentially for 1 year for COVID. The ones in green are positions that we have had this year, and again, I mentioned that previously when we went through the schools. We're asking for 2 of those positions. If you look over in the second to last right column, 2 positions will be moving forward as our proposal at $210,000, again, all in. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the .4 English, we're proposing that move forward. These are class size reduction items. And then the third one is the nurse, as I mentioned, and we're proposing a .8 move forward in local money, plus there's the .4 FTE that we already had budgeted as budget to actual. So you'll see a 1.2 for nursing in the budget. So all told, 3.2 FTEs we're recommending move forward for $280,000. These are the budget numbers. When you take all the priorities and you take everything else that's in our budget, all of the mostly salaries and benefits, the bigger items, regular instruction is up $641,000 or 3.42%. For next year, special education is up $446,000, 5.94%. And by the way, on April 4th, we will go through for the board all these cost areas, the cost and expenses and the variances, and what came to the variance of $641,000 for regular education. For example, we'll go through what is contained in that variance. For CTE, we put zeros there. We keep that in there. The state requires that that's one of our cost centers. However, for the last few years, the state has been picking up the full cost of CTE. It does not flow through the school districts anymore. We're not charged for each student like we were about 5 years ago. That was part of an adjustment that the state made, so they directly pay CTE centers. And so PATS is our CTE center, that we're part of, and the state pays them directly. So that's why you see 0. Doesn't mean we don't have any students going. We have anywhere from 30 to 45 students each year that attend paths. We have 3 or 4 students that attend the Westbrook vocational school as well. Other instruction, we're up $21,981 or 2.73%. Student and staff support, we're up $325,000 or almost 11%. System administration is the district office, we're up $220,000, 21.1%. School administration is up $260,000, 16.4%. Transportation is up $59,000 or 3.17%. Facilities and maintenance up $390,000 or 9.61%. Debt service is down $92,975. It's down 3%. And the overall variance for budget to budget from fiscal year 22 to 23, the variance is $2,273,680.13, or 5.43% expenditure increase. Let's take a look at revenue. The FY23 projected budgeted revenue for a general fund, our variance is $283,247.95. This is our state aid that we get from the Maine Department of Education, enacted by the legislature. The legislature enacts the final dollar at the end of the session. They haven't done that yet. Our preliminary estimate is $12,923,021.51 is what we're expected to get in state aid. So we're up we're up slightly, 283,000 as a variance in our state aid or state subsidy from the state that we're estimating. There was money that the legislature enacted after the budget was adopted last year. There is a variance between that enactment of that money and the money that we are expected to be getting from the State Department of Education. And when you put all those things together, we're actually up 283,000. Another way of looking at it is that we are projected to get a decrease in subsidy, and I'll explain that in just a minute with a little more detail. Shabig Island. When Shabig Island seceded years ago from the district, they have a signed agreement that requires them to continue paying on facilities. They've been paying on facilities for many years. Each year it goes down just a little bit, so next year they're not going to be, they won't have to pay as much. They'll be down $6,394. That's revenue that we won't be collecting from them. Miscellaneous revenue, we expect to be around $50,000 again next year. And total revenue coming in is $13,100,662.51, or 2.16% that we're up in revenue. State subsidy outlook. So as I mentioned earlier, while we're going to net a slight increase in the budgeted state aid, which was, so you mentioned $283,000. We are actually, the state subsidy at our district will not be maintained at the expected levels that we're hoping for and that we expected to get. The legislature, and through the funding formula, is not funding our districts and other districts at the levels that we thought was going to come through. So in effect, you could look at it as a decrease in state aid, but they also enacted the $1.2 million after the fact, after the budget was enacted last summer, if we recall that, and so we have to factor that in, and that's why it's showing that we are slightly increasing in our revenue of $283,000. Another way of, one of the reasons our state subsidy isn't as high as we thought it would be is property valuation continues to increase in both Cumberland and North Yarmouth. The state says that if your value of your property in your towns is increasing, then in exchange, the state says we shouldn't have to pay as much for the education of the students in your district. So the state is assuming that we can locally raise more money. Another reason that the state subsidy isn't what we have received in previous years Enrollment has been flat during the 2 years of COVID, although we were up this year. It was flat the previous year. The state takes an average of 2 years, puts that together, and then they give you your subsidy based on that. So we're actually, because we've been increasing in the district with students, we actually have a net decrease because of all the increases we've had in student enrollment over the last 2 years. So that calculates against your state subsidy. So when you have more students, you get more state aid. When you have less students or you're remaining flat, in essence, you're actually receiving less state aid. We also had less transportation mileage and costs in 21-22. If you remember, we did not run buses on Wednesdays last year, and that accounted for that. That also goes back on the revenue side, and the state doesn't give you the revenue on the other end of things. Debt service for the middle school project. That middle school project has been decreasing annually. It's good for us that it's decreasing, but it's also good for the state on their end because there is a state share of that debt service. And so even though the debt service is declining, we're also losing revenue from the state, which is, they have a share in that and they paid for part of that project. And then finally, special education identification numbers were down last year. We were in the hybrid model, as you recall, and students were in smaller class sizes, and students were in school 2 days a week. Even though they were in school 2 days a week, they were getting a lot of attention, a lot of RTI, and our numbers basically remained flat and then declined a little bit last year. And so again, that impacts your state subsidy. There is a different weighting that's given to special education. Students, the state gives you a little bit more money for students depending on the area of disability in special education. So those are reasons why we did not receive the expected state aid that we would have received. I'm not going to go through these items, but just to show you, we're just over $900,000 in requests that were put forward by administrators, strategic priorities that they had requested and that we were not able to fund in this proposed budget. Cost center descriptors, I probably should have showed you that a couple slides ago, but if you're interested, these are the descriptors that come from the state as to the actual cost centers in our budget. When you look at all of the cost centers in the budget, and those are the numbers that I had showed just a few slides ago, we are pretty consistently above the state average in the amount of funding that we put directly to the classroom for instruction and learning. We're at 71.7% of our budget goes directly to the classroom. Remember, there's a lot of components that go into a budget, whether it's debt service, facilities, transportation. Those pieces are not directly servicing the classroom. Those are essential functions. But for the classroom at 71.7% goes directly to the classroom, and the state average usually runs around 68%. The district has been involved in many years of strategic fiscal planning. Here are some recent things that we've been doing. A contingency for next year is being moved out of the general fund. We have been budgeting $438,000 in contingency, and we are moving that out of the general fund. That way we will be using the money only if we need it. If we don't need the contingency, we won't use it. So in other words, we're not putting it on our expenditure side. We're not raising taxes on something that we are not necessarily needing. We're also going to be looking at including a fuel stabilization fund to offset any unforeseen expenses that we didn't budget for. Again, if you remember, it was $256,000, I believe, in estimated increases in utilities. But if it goes beyond that amount, we'd like to have a warrant article for a fuel stabilization fund. Again, that would sit outside the general fund, and again, it would only be used if it needed, come out of fund balance. So that's what we're proposing as part of this budget. We have frozen our budget. It's been frozen since January, actually, That means that no non-essential, non-essential items that are in our budget during the current year has to have prior approval of the district office before it can be spent. So anything that could be discretionary, we require approval at this point. We're doing this in order to position the money that we would have at the end of the year in order to prepay some of the expenses and make some assumptions about paying off leases early in order to position the district in a better situation so that we're not having to budget those expenses going into the year, and the budget includes those adjustments for paying off leases. We've estimated the costs on those things, and we are trying to pay off, for example, all the modular leases. We have to pay an annual amount for that. The technology leases that we've been carrying, trying to pay those off early if we have money at the end of the year. So we're positioning our budget to do that in the current year. We're also trying to prepay, as I mentioned earlier, expenses like the ALICE program, early website fees that we have, so that we're not carrying those expenses if we can into the new year, and we can therefore go back and zero those items out if we haven't already done so in the budget. And finally, building up the fund balance in anticipation of a new school. We're trying to, in fund balance, put money in there in order to ramp up the expenses that would come from debt service if the new school project is approved by voters. FY23 contingency and fuel stabilization, more information about this. This is considered a rainy day fund for those that are wondering what a contingency is. These are for unforeseen expenses. Again, these would be separate warrant articles, $450,000, which is about 1% of the proposed budget, which would be the contingency being carried outside of the general fund. $250,000 in fuel stabilization. Again, neither one of these would be used unless we need it. They would not raise taxes. They're not part of our tax effect that we're looking at for budgeting. They reduce budget assumptions, so we're not putting money in that we don't necessarily, we wouldn't necessarily need or use unless we need it. And there, again, I mentioned there's no tax effect on that because it's drawing from fund balance. So again, getting down to the tax effect in Cumberland, the estimated tax effect at this point that we have numbers for. The estimated mill rate increase would be 60 cents on the mill, or 2.93% increase in expenditures. This simply means that for every $100,000 of assessed property value, the homeowner would be paying $60 more for every $100,000. So someone who has a home assessed at $400,000, it would be $240 increase on the school side in Cumberland. North Yarmouth, it's a little bit more complicated at this moment. The estimated mill rate increase would be $1.19 on $100,000, or 7%. And there is a red disclaimer, and I just want to read that carefully so that it's very apparent. In previous years, we've had from both towns some estimation of growth in property value that's given to us for the presentation. At this point, we don't have that information from North Yarmouth, and so we're holding on that, but we wanted to put the number out that the town has given for the school side at this point and put that out, hoping that number certainly comes down from 7% or $1.19. And again, at this point, we're saying it's $119 for every $100,000 of assessed property. So if that was the case, it would be a worst case scenario in North Yarmouth. For a home assessed at $400,000, it would be a $476 increase for taxes on the school side. Again, worst case scenario. So just looking at a history of the SAD expenditure and taxes, and looking at where we've tried to come in for many years, the board has made very earnest efforts, the Finance Committee, in working with us for several months prior to it being presented each year. I've made really good inroads in making sure our expenditures are held to a reasonable level. while also supporting the education of our students in our district. So you can see going back, we've been at 3.96, which was last year for expenditure percentage, 4.85, 2.66, 3.84, 2.83, 3.42, 3.6, 3.6. You can see that we've tried to maintain as, I believe, as reasonable as prudent numbers of expenditures each year. And the tax effect, you can see, has been, I think, very prudent, and we thank the towns for also making sure that the growth and value for development has been part of that tax effect and offsetting it. You can see tax effects have been anywhere from 0%, which was in 2020, and we've had 1.06 or 0.91 in North Yarmouth last year, 1.06 in Cumberland. We've tried to hold the tax effect, I think, at very reasonable numbers as much as we've been able to do. This year is slightly higher in expenditures because of all the needs that we've had, utility increases that I mentioned coming out of COVID, as well, losing ESSER funds. These are all things that are driving up our expenses. Also, we've gone through our employee contracts, and we've negotiated as well some with our employees recently in different contract areas in trying to keep up with inflation. So those are all reflected in this budget. I want to look at a regional comparison, and again, I just want to put a disclaimer that these numbers change a lot. So this is as of today, these numbers are there. Just like our district, our numbers go down slightly, not usually up, but usually down. I'm not going to say that too loud because you never know. But I expect that most of these numbers on this regional comparison will also drop over the next few weeks. That usually happens during the adjustment period. But this is what we have right now. We're at 5.4% here in the proposed expenditures. Yarmouth next door is at 10.7%. Falmouth's at 4.8%. Cape Elizabeth 6.5%. Gorham 10.7%. Portland 5.1%. Westbrook 5.6%. Gray New Gloucester 6.1%. Scarborough 6.4%, just to give you some flavors of districts right around us. You can also see the tax effect. Again, we're 2.93 Cumberland, 7 in North Yarmouth. Yarmouth's at 8.4, 6.5 in Falmouth. Cape Elizabeth doesn't have a number yet. They're presenting this week. Gorham at 17% on the tax, although the superintendent did say she fully expects that number to drop, but that was based on her proposal. Portland at 4.1, Westbrook 8.9, Gray at 0, Gray New Gloucester 3.4, and Scarborough at 5.3. Kind of gives you a flavor of where we stand right now on both the expenditures and the tax effects. This is a slide I think is one of the most important slides to show. I think it's critical because it includes state aid, which is something our district receives a good share of state aid, has for many years. So our gross budget, again, this is based on numbers today, our gross budget of $44.1 million. You take less revenue, we're expecting to collect $13.1 million in revenue, which creates a tax effect or tax assessment between the two towns, total of just over $31 million. We currently have 2,102 students, and that gives you an adjusted per pupil when you divide the number of students into the tax assessment of $14,757 is our per pupil adjusted amount. When you look at Yarmouth and Falmouth, do the same. Take the gross budget that they're proposing as of today, you minus the revenue that is expected to be collected by the number of students, and it will give you an adjusted per pupil. That is the only really reasonable way to look at per pupil costs, because you've got to include revenue as well. And so per pupil in Yarmouth is $15,270, in Falmouth $16,634. Again, Cape is presenting their budget this week, and they'll have their numbers, and we'll have that for you when I do the summary in April. Finally, the next steps in the budget process for anyone who wants to be involved. On April 4th, there will be a workshop for the budget, and that's really for the board to do its work around looking at essentially every cost center and every line of the budget, which they do annually, looking at all those variances. This is a high-level presentation, kind of getting more into the weeds of what the budget looks like, explaining all the variances and showing where the variances are in our $44 million budget that we're proposing. Monday, April 25th is a public hearing, again, right here in this room. The budget workshop is a public meeting, I should have said that. Locations in a different location will be in the high school library. The public hearing on April 25th will be in this room. On Monday, May 2nd, the board is scheduled to adopt the budget officially. It's when the budget becomes the board's and not the superintendent's. And again, that will take place in this room. There is public comment that night as well for anyone who wishes to comment on the budget. So there's those two occasions, plus there's public comment at the workshop. If there's anyone who wishes to speak, but that's primarily a work time for the board. The district budget meeting, the last 2 years, the governor has waived the district budget meeting requirement and has allowed it to be handled remotely in a different manner. But we are now back after 2 years to a live district budget meeting, and it will be in this room. So we'll be welcoming people who are voters in the community to come and vote. You get to vote twice. It's the only place in America, as Scott will say, that you get to vote on something twice instead of once. So exercise your right to vote. You get to vote once at the district budget meeting on May 19th, which is a Thursday evening. And the time is 7 o'clock in this room. And then on Tuesday, June 14th, you get to vote again by ballot and at your polling station in each town. So that is the budget proposal. Go through it.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to open it up to the board for questions and discussion, and then I'll open it up to the towns if they have questions as well.
Can I just ask? So Tyler, our questions should be high level, because at our next meeting, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, right?
Absolutely. And I think also for myself, you and Kevin and Peter, we've been through this to this point. So I think for those of us that aren't on the finance committee, it might be helpful just to ask a couple of questions before going into the very detailed questions and answered that we do on the board. So yeah, thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah? You want to start down there, Vanessa?
I don't like to go first, but I will. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. I have two questions with Mabel I. Wilson. What was it per classroom size? What we were trying to keep that at? I didn't hear you.
So Mabel Wilson's a little bit different. We usually try to keep our kindergarten sizes around 16, 17.
Okay.
First grade, 17, 18. It's been different during COVID. We've even gone a little bit lower. For some classes, they might be a little bit lower than that. But that's generally our typical way of keeping our classes. By third grade, they have been up in 23s. We're trying to keep those numbers down.
Okay.
So that we're not going beyond 2021s.
And then when they go into the other schools, they get a little bit bigger.
They will be higher next year because we're only carrying one of the four. We were able to keep fourth and fifth grade class sizes this year down to around 18, 19s, and they'll be going up next year.
And I noticed that we have the math specialist. Are you looking for a dedicated math specialist for Mabel I. Wilson, or?
This will be a 3-5. So right now we have two math specialists at the elementary level that share. So we have a K2 and a 3-5.
Yes.
And we want to bring on a third one, which we did with a literacy specialist. We have 3, and so that we're able to do a K1, 2, 3, and a 4-5.
Okay. And with the increase, the projected increase in enrollment, are we looking at ed techs or an increase?
No, we didn't add it. We've added ed techs in the past. Ed techs are usually special education dependent for the most part. We have regular education ed techs as well that we have, but we're not proposing any increases. And we don't actually have any increases for special education ed techs in this budget either. That's based on need, and when Julie went through the budget, and looked at her needs. She had enough existing positions to cover her needs.
Okay, we're not losing any from this year to next year?
No.
Okay.
No.
The HR for the district, that is going to be working under
That would be working under Scott.
Scott. Okay, so it wouldn't be like a parallel position, it would be working
Yeah,
directly
it
under
would be,
you.
right, Scott would be the director overseeing, and this would be a specialist level position that would be working under Scott.
Okay, all right, I think that's it for now.
So I know we have the energy conservation effort that we did with Siemens, but when was actually the last time we did an energy audit of the district, of the buildings?
You mean to know what we're actually saving?
Yeah, to explore if there are further areas for optimization, for conservation, for efficiency gains.
Yeah, it's been several years since we've done an actual energy project in the district. I think we did 2 back around 14, 15, 16 in there. We haven't done another energy project since then, but we do get the reports, which is great, and anybody can go and look at them. We make them public on the website, as you know, but they actually show that we continue to save energy all these years later, this was something that we paid for to make sure that we're going to get those energy savings, and we have them.
That's great. I think it would be worth us having an expert come in and just doing an additional audit to come through and look at windows, look at heat and airflow, and so on and so forth, to see if there are any significant items we can patch up, especially given the mammoth energy costs we're dealing with.
I think it's a good idea. We can probably have Siemens or someone else come in and do an audit for us. I mean, considering the cost of utilities at this point. Obviously, one of the projects we're looking at is the Mabel I. Wilson School project. We know the building envelope of that building needs to be, basically we need new doors, we need new windows. We're losing utilities through that building.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're getting, as you know, is the state funding to pay for through the revolving renovation funds to help replace windows and doors in that project. So, but I think an energy audit, that might be a good topic for facilities to have them discuss it.
There's also, in the federal government passed an infrastructure bill, and within it there's a school renovation fund, which I think the Department of Energy is going to be putting out solicitations on that within the next couple of months. So just something we should also consider.
That's great.
So we have 21 modulars, and we added a bunch due to COVID because we wanted to make sure that we could meet any distancing requirements. Do we still need all of them?
We're going to need some for enrollment, yes, just enrollment, period. So we need to keep them. I think the other piece, and this was discussed by the Facilities Committee early on in the process, and I won't probably defer to Kevin on this one, but we looked at the information for the modulars and the setup costs that we paid, and looking at the enrollment that we're projecting coming through in the next 3 years. And does it make sense to rip those modulars out and then have to put them back in? I know the administrators were very concerned that, in a year, we're going to be asking for those back. And when Scott and I discussed the cost of doing that, we proposed to the Finance Committee that we not do that we just keep them. But I don't know if Kevin or Scott, if you want to speak more about that.
No, now the modulars require a sprinkler system, fire system, which is different from the past, and the setup costs are pretty extraordinary between alarms, electrical, water, sewer, okay, right down to fire alarms, right down to fire alarms and right down to the other security systems. It becomes quite expensive. So when you pick up your head and you kind of look out at the building project that we're going to be doing and what the enrollment is going to look like, we really need to keep those for the future and not be short-sighted and move them now.
And just to be clear, we have 21 classrooms.
Yeah.
We don't have 21 units.
10.
11, I believe.
Yeah.
We have 21 classrooms outside, and we have, one of our units has a dozen classrooms in it.
Thank you.
But a fair amount are at the middle school, and I don't think it was discussed during the finance meeting. Okay.
It was in a couple different ways. So, as beautiful as these things look, I would rather them not be here. But at the end of the day, the money that was expended putting them here with the additional costs that we had that we may not have had in the past. It's one of those tough things. Love to move them off and save money immediately, but if we need to bring them back, then we have to, all those sunk costs that we have would just be terrible.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. That was a question I had, but that makes a lot of sense. Just a few really quick ones. So the legal fees, we're bumping up to meet what the budget actuals were this year, but this past year we had significant costs associated with FOIA requests. Are we expecting that to continue, or is this just playing it safe?
No, this is based on current year, but also projected. They also raise their rates every year, and they give us an estimate. So some of it is just purely raising their rates. I mean, legal costs are going up everywhere, but so we take that projection and then we look at our current costs and try to estimate. We have been going up in legal costs every single year for several years.
Okay. Avoid any lawyer jokes. There is one last question, and I know it's a specific line item, but it's one I care a lot about. So the adaptive playground structure was one that didn't make the final cut at this point. Are we ADA compliant without it, though?
Yes, we are. I think that was a question that came up when we were looking at that. We're ADA compliant with our playground as it is. It would be a really great thing to have, and we wanted to, and there was a lot of discussion when I met with the person who proposed it, and then we ended up meeting with a few other people to look at it. Was could we fundraise for it? Whether we're, Foundation 51 or PTO, were they able to contribute? And it's just such a huge expense that just didn't meet the bill at that point. It's still something that can be fundraised. And I think the other piece is we don't know where all of this equipment is going to go if this building project goes through. But the biggest reason is it just, with all the competing priorities, we just couldn't make it work this year.
Okay. I would think it should very soon move to a need to have than a great to have.
So I've done 4th and 5th grade duty out there on that playground a few times, and I will say that the kids, there's no kids that are just, there's kids that mill around but they want to. They're milling around in groups or whatnot. I don't see that there are kids that are just, like, I can't believe there's nothing to do out here. There's so many other things that they're doing. They're playing soccer, they're playing football, or they're climbing on the structures that are doing and playing games, hide and seek. Going into the pavilion. The pavilion is extremely popular. But would it be nice to have? Yes, it would absolutely be nice to have, but no. We don't have any ADA issues. It would just be nice. It would augment what we've got.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. This is well done, Jeff. I like how it's laid out. A few random comments, similar to what Kevin and Mike were saying. I think it would be important and helpful for people to see all the temporary costs that we had last year related to COVID, see them go away, like line by line, almost like its own page, to sort of help people through that process, and any of the ones that are staying sort of highlight that and why, explain why we're doing that. Teachers, we had a lot of temporary positions with teachers. Are we able to absorb some of those teachers and keep them here through retirements and that sort of thing?
We'll be able to, I think, absorb some already. Just saying that right now. April 15th is our deadline for people telling us if they're going to retire. It's a deadline only because we have an incentive for letting us know by April 15th. But we already have some retirements. We have them every year, and we expect that there'll be some openings that people that are on one-year positions can apply for.
Yep.
We plan to advertise our positions very shortly. We're not waiting. We're waiting to get through the presentation and get through the workshop on the 4th, and then we're going to start advertising. Some of the positions that we already know are just replacement of positions we've always had. We're going to advertise now, and then we'll wait until after the 4th to anything that's a new position that we're recommending as a priority in this budget.
Yep.
But yes, I think there'll be some teachers will be able to absorb. They'll have to apply for the position still.
Being able to highlight that maybe in here would be kind of like a silver lining to the extra costs and all we had to do last year to see that we were able to keep them and capitalize on that in such a tough.
And I'll just add that we had 8.4 teachers that we added to the roles, and they've been amazing people that we've had. We were very fortunate to have them this year.
Random things, with COVID on its way out, will there be more opportunities to collect revenue for this space?
I think there will be. Definitely that's revenue that we want to start collecting. We want to start using the space more. Even this spring, there's more plans. I know in May we've got a couple of events that are scheduled. And I definitely think that will be an area for revenue for next year.
Okay.
We're just not going to estimate more at this point.
All right, fair enough. Cost per pupil, I agree that it's appropriate to show the number after the state subsidy, but I see no harm in actually showing the number in total investment that we're showing in each pupil. I think it's kind of like saying, since we do get state subsidy, we can say we're investing $21,000 per child, but we're only paying, $14,700.
Yeah, and actually, I think I've done that previous years, and I did leave that off.
I think it's a worthwhile line to keep in there. I don't see any harm in it, and actually, you could look at that as a positive thing.
Yeah, I'll add that, Jason, for the next, when I do a summary in April.
And then the only other thing I might throw out there is Vanessa sort of asked about, why would we not make the HR position like straight up district level? Not that I don't love Scott, but he's got plenty on his plate. Why wouldn't we do that?
More money, for one thing. I really think that, well, first of all, Scott performs some really important HR functions that I don't think we'd want to immediately be giving to someone else anyway. I think this is, a lot of districts have this level of support. We actually looked at some other districts that have a specialist and not a director for the district. I think with our structure in the office, it works better that way.
That would be a big leap, but potentially something that could happen in the future, or wise to happen maybe?
I think down the road maybe, but I think right now this really seems to be the best place. We were trying to find like a middle ground, what's going to help substantially with some of the work with this many employees, without spending top dollar for doing it, but also get the job accomplished.
Yep.
So I think this was, we just discussed this a lot. Like, what does this actually look like? It was out of the budget, at one point, and then I think the Finance Committee asked to discuss it again, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's gone back and forth. It's been tossed
Fair
back and
enough.
forth.
I think it's a logical step, regardless of what the next year holds.
We have a detailed job description and functions as well that we shared out.
Okay. On the increase from North Yarmouth, Scott, am I correct in saying that that's without the growth of the town factored in there?
That is true. Yeah.
So we'll see that 7% potentially drop to 5 or 4 or something.
That's what we're hoping.
And that's by distributing those costs over the additional houses, correct?
And that's what we've always been used to in North Yarmouth, is getting a number that's substantially less than that.
Yeah. So the vote that happened last week, then you'll see that cost per household drop, and then they'll be pleased with the growth, okay? Potentially.
I don't know how the referendum results will affect it. Yeah, I don't know how it will affect it. Yeah, I would defer.
On that topic, Bill Shane did a great presentation this past Tuesday for the Cumberland Planning Board that touched on that, and hopefully soon, once the census numbers are updated, we'll have a new report from GP Cog, which was one of the most enlightening reports that we had in the last few years, that sort of showed that our growth, pupil-wise, in this town really comes from turnover in the houses, not really from building growth. But that would be interesting.
Yeah, and that will mirror what Rebecca Wandell told you in December, I think, when she came, or November, when she did a report. And in 2019, she said the same thing. Turnover housing is where you're finding, most of your students. Housing definitely, but it's the turnover housing.
Yep.
Yeah, we supplied information to a number of people in North Yarmouth who asked that on how many students were in each development and so forth. Yep. And I don't think it threw off exactly what people were expecting.
Oh, it's enlightening. It's hard to control growth. You can manage growth. It's hard to control.
And these towns were among the highest in the turnover. I mean, any place in southern Maine.
Because we're great. Yeah. Secret's out.
I got a place for sale.
That's it. I think that's all I got.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you have anything?
I think I'll just make it short. Jeff, how many kindergarten classes are you planning for the fall at this point? I know it's a moving target.
I think, so yeah, it is a moving target. I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you. That, you know, that's, those two positions that we have in the budget are accounting for enrollment at whatever grade that we need to look at. And so it may not necessarily be kindergarten. So we're counting on 11 classes for kindergarten at this point, but I just don't know. You know, our registrations are strong right now, but it's only March.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're at 140 for registrations. We're projecting, you know, 180 or something like that. So it really depends. You know, if those positions, and this, we've done this before, if for some reason the kindergarten class doesn't come through with projections, then we don't do that. If we can make an adjustment in the budget later in the spring, and we're seeing that it's getting that in that direction, we'll do that. We've done that before.
Okay. And I may be approaching this incorrectly, but on the cost per pupil, shouldn't we be using the number of students that align with the same year that the expenditures are aligned?
So I've been asked that, and I did think about that, to put that in there, but because it's an estimate, I wanted to use an actual number.
can
But
see
I
that
agree
too,
with
but-
you. I agree.
So essentially, if you use those numbers, it's a lower cost.
Right. I think the biggest thing is being consistent, like not using for another district we're comparing to
Right.
next year's numbers, just
Yep.
making sure we're consistent. But I agree with you, and I kind of toyed back and forth whether to use this year's or the estimate for next year.
Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense. Thank you.
Kevin? I just want to, I know everybody's here from town. I want to make sure, I know you guys are being patient, so thanks for listening.
Yeah, a couple things. Because we've had a long time to look at these, I do want to thank Peter and Jennifer for the many hours that you put in on this. Scott and Jeff as well, and Scott for taking all my obnoxious phone calls. Looking at these numbers, and I think going in reverse order, I think Jason's spot on. When you look at that cohort comparison, it'd be one thing to look at just that, just the number of what it costs per pupil, but for many reasons, our subsidy is higher, and sharing both is certainly provides a better snapshot as opposed to just looking at one of those. This document that was out front, as well as everybody up here has, this is really needs to be your best friend until the 4th and beyond, because when we go through that exercise, for anyone who hasn't done that before, going line by line with Scott walking through the assumptions of every expenditure that we make as a district, this is the place where you can redline, and I would advise going largest to smallest on those. Some of those things that jumped out that, regrettably I tried to tease out a few weeks ago, which were those energy costs, because it's horrifying. And it's something that we cannot control, given our current envelope in many of the buildings. I know we can build better looking forward, and there are certain things that maybe when COVID has ceased being an issue, we don't have to run all of our systems wide open, and that may allow us to recoup some dollars. But looking at some of these different things, when within finance, as we look at the different roles as they're presented by the superintendent, we're going line by line on that. And it's, while it's tempting to say no out of the sake of saying no, when we look at numbers, it just didn't work that way, or it can't work that way. Some of those different things, as we look at those, is why now are you asking for this position? Can it be pushed into subsequent years? And when it could be, we certainly would do that. But some of these roles have been pushed and pushed and pushed. In the 6 years I've been on the board, things have come up each year, and the answer has been no. So as we looked at a few of these this year, this is why they're in the budget. And of course, when the board comes together on the 4th, you continue to push back on these if you're not comfortable. But things like the HR role. Now, Mr. Poulin does a fabulous job. But there's a number of things that within his role he's forced to focus on, I believe, can be better suited by somebody who is at a different salary level than he is, and allow him to focus on those things like driving down the cost of facilities and effective financial management. I think that we can say the same thing within those positions that are in there for the GHS student services role. And we rejected that 3 times until some folks came in and made very clear what we're talking about at this point right now is nearly essential. in that it's providing some of the proactive things for students that are at the greatest need. Again, with the utilities piece, while we cannot control that today, and ideally costs will go down, I think having a real discussion around fuel stabilization will allow us to mitigate this somewhat, or at least dampen the curve this year and into subsequent years. And if we can build something there that we don't need to touch, that's even better. But right now, where there's a current crisis, I think it makes sense. I know that as everybody continues to ask their questions, there are certainly additional resources, and anybody in the room can reach out, and I think that everybody's willing to provide any insight that we can. That's all.
I'm really grateful to have you share finance, Kevin. Thank you. Peter?
Just a couple things. One, in my civilian life, when I worked, one of the things that I was responsible for besides finance was administration and HR. And I think unless you're in it and see it every day, you don't realize what a complicated thing it is, and the nuances of the new laws and everything else. And I think my observation over the last 2 or 3 years that we have been woefully understaffed in that area, and so based on the experience I've had, I have no problem calling to the points of North Yarmouth and Cumberland and everything to support that wholeheartedly. The second thing is that I ran into Steve Moriarty, I think Monday, and I asked him that, you know, they're handing out $850 to all the good voters of Maine. And I said, has there been any thought of setting up some kind of a fund to go back to look at the revenue sharing for the towns, to get some kind of an indication of the effect of these energy prices on the towns? I don't know if it would ever come back to the school district, but certainly if it comes back to the towns, it drives the overall tax rate. I think after talking to Steve and looking at the debate in the House and everything, I think it should be seriously looked at, but I think at the end of the day I would be performing a bodily function in a 99-mile-an-hour wind, so it isn't going to happen. But you know, if anybody out there agrees, I think it would be good to talk to your local legislature, because it is coming directly onto your tax bill, and you've seen the numbers, $286,000 that's going to come on ours. So just a thought, but it's a real problem for every municipality in Maine, and that's all I have.
Thanks, Peter.
I wasn't going to mention bodily functions, but I was going to ask the same question about our state budget surplus. So, Peter, you beat me to the punch.
Brilliant minds.
Yeah.
Alike.
So I'll try to keep this quick. First of all, thank you, Jeff and Scott, and to the Finance Committee for an incredibly thoughtful budget proposal. I only have one question, and it actually applies to the fiscal 22 expenditures. Jeff, you mentioned a few opportunities for prepaid expenses, and I'm wondering, how is our capacity to do that, especially given the current surging fuel costs? Are we well positioned to prepay those expenses?
I think with freezing the budget, we're definitely in a better position. We've had to say no to a lot of things, actually, that are non-essential, but it is positioning us to start paying, think about paying some leases off. It's too early still, but we'll be doing that at the end of the year. So I think it is going to, I don't know if we can give you a number yet. The board does have to approve all these transfers between lines in June, so you'll see those numbers, what we're able to do. But I think right now it is starting to look promising that we can do that, even with all the added expenses, things that were unbudgeted. We're able to kind of make up some ground there.
Thank you.
Avery or Madison, do you have any questions about the budget?
As a representative of the senior class, this doesn't affect us, and if I had it my way, all $32 million would go to my graduation.
Thank you.
Well, Madison,
Same.
won't you be coming back? Now, everybody says they'll never come back, but people always say they'll never come back to their hometown, but they all do.
Oh, I'll definitely come back, but I won't come back to the school. I'll come back to my house.
You say that, and then all of a sudden, you're here.
I
You're
know.
It's like really graduated.
You'll
Yeah.
be surprised how fast it is.
Avery, do you have anything?
No, this is really cool.
Thanks for
That's all I have to
following
say,
along.
though.
Avery's going to be a finance director someday.
It's
So
very
thank
cool.
you to North Yarmouth and Cumberland for sitting here. This is, you guys have your own budgets, so I know that this is an addition to your work that you're already doing. So I appreciate you listening, and I'd be, open up the podium for either town. Why don't we do North Yarmouth first?
Hi, Brian Seitz. I'm the chair of the Select Board in North Yarmouth. I got a lot of questions, and they're all going to kind of come at a random angle. First, from Diane, she had to take off and leave early, but so have you gone out to bid for your standard offer on your utilities, and how often do you do that?
We've not gone out to bid on that because one of the things that's been a concern in the district and by the Cumberland Climate Action Team is that if you go through the standard offer, most of that electricity is hydro. It is more carbon-free than if you go out for bidding that to the lowest cost.
Okay. Can you clarify a couple acronyms for folks? ALICE, ESSER, and I think I know what CTE paths are, but can you clarify what those acronyms
Yeah,
are?
CT is Career Technical Education. I'm sorry, you know what, in the past, we have had an acronym list that we've given people, and I didn't have that this year, so thanks for reminding me. But ESSER funds is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that provided extra relief funds for school districts in the country. So those are federal dollars. There's 3 rounds of them. And
So I'm
then-
assuming that was COVID related and that's winding down?
Yes, they're
Okay.
it's COVID money, and now some districts, because Lewiston, for example, received 20 million. We had 393 in ESSER 3, and other districts received millions. So they actually can use it for another year. We've already used up our money.
Okay. Just a question on the, under the direct services side. The facilities truck, is that a lease? Is it a purchase payment? Is it cost and maintenance? What is in that?
That's lease. That's just a strict lease. Yep.
Okay. I had a question.
It's a lease purchase.
And we can purchase it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. On the HR specialist side, there was a question about whether there's been any discussion about having an HR committee to help assist with some of those duties.
Yeah, there are some districts that have a personnel committee that that's part of it's basically a board committee that's established. Not many districts have those left, and it's just because of the confidentiality of personnel matters.
And as far as, we had a question on the fuel. So we see the system, and I'm sure you'll get into this when you go through the line item budget process, but we were just kind of curious. You've got the system admin, the school admin, the transportation. The transportation looks low as a percentage of the overall growth in fuel. So where is that fuel number actually located in those 3?
It's located, the diesel fuel is what you're looking at?
Yeah. I was
Yeah,
just curious.
it's under transportation in the cost center for transportation.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually it's flat this year to next year. And the reason for that is I believe we were over budgeted in that fuel line. And I also had a conversation with the town of Cumberland where we get our fuel from. And they're currently working on that cost as well, so.
Okay. And Diane had a question that I didn't totally understand, but she wanted to know if the payoff leases early, if that payment is actually included in this budget.
That payment is not currently included in the budget. We've actually pulled those out, assuming that we're going to prepay them.
That's why we've made assumptions, and I was trying to answer Tom's question too, but we're making assumptions that we can do this, and that's why we froze the budget so early in January, which is unheard of. We don't we often don't freeze the budget at all. And that's because we're trying to pay those things off, and we've made assumptions in the budgeting process. Like the ALICE program, you'll see that that was still in there. We're going to try to pay that off, and that would become a zero in the budget if we can do it. But for most things, that we've made assumptions on the leases that we need to pay off.
Okay, great. So just to kind of compare apples to apples, I mean, we talk about a fund balance, but we're usually talking about an undesignated or an unassigned fund balance. The fund balance that you have, capitalized fund balance, is that like an undesignated or unassigned fund balance that you can use for activities in future years?
Unassigned fund balance in a school district, we can't attach that unless we actually allocate it through a warrant article at the district budget meeting. So yes, it's similar to, if you have, at the end of the week, if you have money left from your paycheck in your checking account, that's your fund balance at the end of the week.
Right.
It's the same type of thing here. So, but it's built over time, and we've been building fund balance strategically to help with the new debt on the new building project, and have been pretty diligent about that.
And what is the size of that fund balance currently?
I believe right now it's around 44.6 million is where we're close to right now. That's assuming the 1.2 million in additional subsidy we got last year.
Has the district ever in the past used any of that fund balance towards lowering the overall cost of the budget?
Yes, we have. But the problem with doing that is you create a hole for yourself in the future year. So it's not very strategic in order to do that.
Yeah, my previous district, we often would do that just in order to keep any of our costs down if there wasn't enough revenue. And every year you're digging out of that hole over and over again. And you start with a hole in your budget. That's where you started. So it's not the best budgeting tactic, and that's why we've tried to stay away from it. But even during the time I've been here, we've been weaning off of that. I remember we had a lot at the beginning, and we've been weaning off of doing that.
Okay. And just the last thing is just on just a comment on the estimated tax effect for our side. I mean, there's a comment in here about the SAD is trying to understand the impact of North Yarmouth's TIF district. Our valuation is what our valuation is. I'm not sure why we need that statement in there. I think it's going to be more confusing for community members to have that statement in there than if you took it out.
Well, we're hoping to, yeah, you're probably right. We're hoping to take all that language out and I do it in an adjusted budget summary as well in April before the public hearing, and we update all the numbers after we go through the workshop if there's any adjustments. We get health insurance numbers. There's a lot of things that move between now and the public hearing when the budget is basically set before the board adopts it, and all that language will be taken out as it becomes more public. And hopefully we'll have different numbers for North Yarmouth. So I agree, Brian.
Yeah. But I mean, that is where we are right now, right? So I just don't want to confuse folks. I think that's it.
The important clarification has to be made, though, that we've experienced most new development in our TIF districts, so that
microphone.
That revenue isn't generally available for use on schools. We only have a very limited set of uses for that TIF revenue. So a large portion of our new development is in TIF. We have not had as many elsewhere.
But that's why this is confusing. So that's why I don't want to confuse folks, because if you would eliminate that TIF district, that actually changes our valuation overall, which would give us a higher percentage that we would have to contribute towards the school budget. So it's a very complex calculation, so I don't want to confuse what is actually going on with our overall valuation in the town. Does that make sense?
I think, Brian, what I'm going to do is just remove it, because I do agree. I think it just complicates things. I think it's really about the new valuation and growth.
Correct.
That is, I'll just kind of leave it at that, because this is a public document, and we'll make sure.
Thank you.
I just took it out.
I appreciate it. I yield the floor. Thanks for having us, by the way. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your patience and your questions.
I don't have any questions. I brought my chief financial officer with me this evening, and she will be conducting the questioning part of our representation. I do just have a couple of comments to make. Jason, I appreciate your mathematics there, because I too had done the same thing, and Falmouth is 21,250 Cumberland was 21, Yarmouth is 19.7, 20, 29. You know, the actual cost of, you know, you have to always look at what it really costs, because it costs somebody something to educate our students. And where it doesn't matter really where the money comes from, but we know what it costs, and it's a lot of money. So, anyways, you've got a lot of information here that you put out tonight, this evening, and it's a lot to absorb. And I think the comment that I would make here this evening is that we are continuing to work with you. We were going to put past differences aside and make sure that what we do here is collaborative. Every dollar that we spend has to be examined very closely. Each new dollar of expenditure has to be looked at very carefully. You know, and if we look at, you know, inflation, we look at cost of utilities, and you know, it's very easy to see that, you know, things are more expensive. You go out to buy a new car today, or you want to buy a new pickup truck, but one you may not be able to find one, but we all know that it costs more money. We look forward to working with you to develop a solar field. It's imperative that we get this work done early and soon. Recently, I stepped down from a leadership position as my town Republican chairman because it was a position that was diametrically opposed to what I felt was my role as the chairman of the town council. Nobody has come to me and said my income tax is too high. But we do have people in our community whose property taxes are too high, and we, as a board, are working through some initiatives to help bring that down, to eliminate the continuing increase in costs. And we are very concerned about property tax, and we, you know, so I know you hear that too, and we're concerned about it. But we also understand that as a functioning body, you know, it costs so much money each day to open the doors and turn the lights on. We've gone through our own budget process. We're beginning, we're probably halfway through it, and you know, I can defend that budget, and so, you know, I expect you to do the same thing. You know, sit down, make sure those numbers, every single new dollar of expense, you can stand, all of you together, and say, this is what it's taken to turn the lights on, put our buses on the road, and get our kids educated. And now I'd like to turn it over to my Chief Financial Officer.
And Bob, that reminded me too, I didn't mention this in the presentation, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but there's many months that go obviously into getting to this number, but you reminded me that we started over 8% on expenditures, and we made every due diligence to make sure that we are being as responsible. In the Finance Committee, I just credit the Finance Committee for helping with that process, because we went from over 8% down to 5.4. If we can get even lower, we'd love to. And we do that every year. And I think that's really important to know that we're trying to keep the value, and then what is reasonable in terms of what can people pay for it as well. And trying that balance is very important. So, thank you.
So I'm Allison Foster. I'm the vice chair for the town council, and apparently designated CFO to Bob Vail. So thank you for having us. Brian actually hit on a couple of my questions, so that checked a few off. I guess maybe something too in kind of relation to how it's being presented. There's clearly a lot of movement of teacher staff with like the 1 years and then what those coming out, right? So the 8 not all coming back. And then as you list your priorities, it only shows the net positive that you're kind of asking. And so trying to connect actually the negative to, if I'm interpreting it correctly, that you had 8 and you're only asking for 4 back or 5?
Actually, we're only asking for that purpose, 2.4 FTEs back, and we had 8.4 this year.
Right, and so I think like by school, that might be helpful for folks to see kind of the true net, and that it's not just, if I'm interpreting this correctly, not just a net positive.
Right. And, yeah, we show that in 2 different places, but I understand what you're saying, Allison. Right. That might make it more clear.
Yep.
So in each school, you know, obviously for Greeley High School, for example, it shows 0.4 English, that's continuing, and then on the other chart at the end, we showed where that 0.4 is continuing. Sorry, I'm going to find that slide. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yep, just more of like putting it all in one spot so folks see the pluses and the minuses movement that you guys are doing. Good point. And then to that, it was hard for me to tell once I started going through the line items, like what's the COLA assumption that's in the salary for like the teachers that are continuing, right? Because I'm just seeing the total of the salary, so it includes the teacher count changes. Is there an inflationary assumption?
Mr. Poulin answered that, but generally we have used 3% as our COLA, but this year we had to increase that slightly, and I can't remember exactly what that was.
Could you ask the question again, Allison? Because I'm not sure I quite understand what you're asking.
The cost of living adjustment for, like, what's your
for staff?
kind of, yeah.
Well, it's I'd have to go back and take a look at it again because one of the factors that's in this is I've already accounted for a lot of retirements.
Okay.
So that piece is built into there, which would, you know, deflate that line.
Right. Nope,
and
that's fair.
And then there's other assumptions around new hires, which are around the master's degree with 8 years experience. Okay.
Yep.
And we tend to hire above that and below that. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
And that's bargained.
That's all collectively bargained, so.
Right, so I guess I was just more just asking kind of like where did the chips land? Obviously, we're looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
My private life, we're working through labor changes and inflation, so more just trying to get a sense of like
it was just
benchmarking.
It was just over 3%.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, when we looked at the increase in the pay scale.
Okay. You made the comment around, or I think Jen asked about ed techs and not adding any ed tech counts, but the salary cost has gone up, and I know we increased the hourly wage for the ed tech, so just more confirming that that's really just a carryover of assuming that hourly increase in order to keep our ed techs.
There was an increase to the beginning of the pay scale, not to the entire pay scale. Okay. And we're actually heading into collective bargaining with the educational technicians now. So, so there's some assumptions built into this, but again, there's not a carryover of those increases except for what we opened the contract for and bargained in those beginning pay scales to attract new hires.
We had vacancies at the beginning of the year that we were not able to fill, and some of it we knew was we were probably not as competitive as we could be.
Yep.
And so there was work with the association done to, with those beginning years, first 5 years, to increase the pay rate.
Okay. Maybe some of my questions too is everything here is relative, at least if I'm understanding this, is relative to the 21-22 budget versus having an understanding of like what's actually been happening this year, and that may just help too, because if I'm understanding correctly, if maybe our budget wasn't accounting for those folks, I'm seeing a very significant increase in ed tech salary, but I think potentially relative to what you're actually at and what's going on, it's not that big of an increase.
So I think some of what you're seeing is a movement of ed techs from different areas, especially in special education. They move between buildings. So you may see a $114,000 increase one way, but there's other reductions in the other buildings that offset that cost. So you may be seeing that, and it's just a shift around those educational technician lines.
Yeah, the other piece, Allison, is that in this budget, and this is what we go through on the 4th, but we also transformed some of our ed tech positions this year because we had vacancies that we weren't filling. So some of them we were able to fill after we increased the rate for the first 5 years. Work with the association on that. The other piece is we transformed into 2 teaching positions. We actually added 2 teaching positions. Work with the association around that, and then eliminated 4 ed tech positions as well. So we also did both of that, and you'll see those adjustments.
Maybe just a last one is like bigger picture. So you noted making, like you put on hold some significant administration costs and increase secretaries, support staff over the last few years, and kind of taking now as the time to pull some of those triggers. So as you look at longer term and looking at potential continued kind of pupil growth, kind of what's the sustainability of, like, are we making a jump and this is kind of where we expect to sit for the next 10 years, or is this hey, this is going to get us through the next 2 and we're still in a painful situation and we know that it's right on the horizon, that there's more administrative staff that we're going to need to add, not counting a new school, like
Right.
just more as you look at kind of where we are today and what you're, the
No,
kind
that's a
of the
great
jumps you're
question.
making.
Some of it's dependent on whether or not the new building project goes through, and that would be, moving staff around, obviously, and how much administrative staff do we need at each building, depending on the size of it. So right now, we're responding to the size of the Wilson School, for the secretary that is, the halftime secretary we put in. I mean, that school is just, exploding in terms of numbers. At the high school, this has been a long-term need, and I think over the last 2 years, the amount of work, the workload, not that all of our administrators and all of our teachers and staff are not experiencing great workload, but the high school, it just became even more obvious because that was a previous need. So compound COVID on top of that, I always say, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. So when there's a problem with it, and I have one at my house, it tends to be magnified 10 times over. And that's what high school is about sometimes. And so in having that administrative support is really essential. I don't know if that answers your question, but the big scope of it is if this building project goes through, we're going to have to relook at all of our staffing, nursing, secretaries, administrators, and where they're being reassigned. If our projections come through and we have 400 more students in our district, or 450 is what's being projected right now for the next 10 years, then we are definitely going to need to add staff just for that sheer reason, that we have 450 more students in our district.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Is that all I had? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Tyler?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I just want to clarify Bob's comment on the costs and revenues, because it is significant. One of the costs that we have our special education costs are higher. Some of it is related to more, some of it is related to the nature of our special education. So the thing is, that's added to our cost. We're looking like a higher cost district. But what we're not looking at is that this is offset by additional special education funds from the state. So part of that revenue stream from the state is related to offsetting those additional special education and other special costs. So when we start, it's the proverbial apple and grape. And then the other thing is that I think there's probably only MIT professors that totally understand the school funding formula. But of course, a lot of Yarmouth and especially Falmouth's property valuation is driven by their larger commercial investment. Now, theoretically, they're collecting some property taxes to offset that, but that is one of the reasons why, again, Falmouth and Yarmouth have less of a state funding thing because they have a larger commercial base than we do. So there's just a lot. It isn't black and white. There are a lot of moving parts to this thing, and yeah, I think Jennifer and the rest of the financial experts on this thing could come up with 10 different formulas, but those are just a couple of the moving parts that it's good for everybody to be educated. There's just, it's the old story, things get complicated when you get past 18.
Well, and there's tweaks in the formula from time
Yeah.
to time too, and there's a lot of tweaks that were made 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And those tweaks had to do with class size. And so when the state adjusts a class size in the formula, it makes a big difference when you look at how many classes we have in our district. So,
If I might respond, I completely agree with you, Peter. There's a lot to it. I remember when we had Baldacci was governor, and we sat down and he said, we're going to fund 55% of education. And the question was, well, what is 55%?
Yeah.
And we said, well, it's essential programs and services. And so we live in a school district that demands much more than essential programs and services, and there's a cost associated with that. And frankly, the solution or the discussion needs to be back with our legislators and how they fund education, because it's a disparity of a wealthy community like Cumberland with high valuations, but no commercial base to support it. And you look at Falmouth and Yarmouth, who don't have the highest valuation that we do, but they have the commercial offset. So it really is a conversation that we need to get our legislatures in here and drive that conversation.
Thank you, Bob. All right. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking questions. I think we should maybe try and do this every year.
Thank you.
I think that might be a good thing to put on the district budget calendar is inviting our towns. I've got to imagine this was helpful. If it wasn't, let me know. We can think about it differently next time. But I just want to say thanks for all your time. We are going to move into, I did mention this is a double feature. We are going to move into a workshop for our school project. We have Tyler Barter here from Oak Point, which is the architects that we have been working with. So if you have nothing else going on, you're more than welcome to stay and listen. But we will move into that next part of our agenda. So thank you all for coming. You're welcome to stay. So Tyler, do you want to join us up here? Do you want to work from the podium? Oh, nice to have you up at the...
Oh, there's an empty.
Oh, yeah. How about down here?
I don't bite. You can come sit next to me.
okay. Yeah, I'll put it up.
Hey, Jim.
I'd like to make a motion to do yoga.
Yeah, I got stuck last time.
Okay. All right. So, Peter, I'm going to probably look to you a little bit to help us kind of guide this conversation. But thank you, Tyler, for joining us. Thank you for your patience in getting to this point in the agenda. All of us have received an update in regards to some of the landscape, new things that we've learned about the property in Gray. And so we're here to talk about that, to talk about the viability of the land, and also about the referendum, and as far as where that makes sense for us in the long term, whether it's June or looking to the fall. So I don't know where we want to start. Do you want to start with the referendum?
I think actually Tyler, I believe, was going to present a few things first, and then I thought we could go into that.
That sounds great.
It might be a good place to kind of answer some questions, or give information and answer questions.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead. Thank you. Is it on?
Nice and close. So I think the first slide that is in my PowerPoint would probably kind of set some of the context on what we're here to discuss on the land viability. So over the past about 4 or 5 weeks, we've had our civil engineer on the site a number of times, doing a lot of prep work for getting geotechnical done and test pits for the subsurface wastewater. And one of the things that he noted when he was out there was some areas that really started looking a little suspicious on the wetland side. So the green doesn't show up well, but you can kind of see a green colored kind of amoeba that kind of snakes through the site. It ultimately ends up with two streams that kind of start off-site on the southern part of the property. That blue area is the kind of the surprise that we found when we had it was the wetland delineator that was provided through the seller. So they had done a delineation, and what we found was a pretty significant area that was not delineated at that time. Jeff, if you go to the next slide. Just toss this one in. This is where we were the last time that we met with you in February. You can see the road coming in from Route 80, kind of snaking its way, the parking kind of at the edge of that field area, and the building kind of headed to the south. If you go to the next one, that's what you look at like when you blow it up, and the additional wetlands that were found out there, and the location for the building. So
we can get rid of this slide, like for the future.
yeah, this is probably the last time that we really need to look at this one. Yes.
Just a simple question. Was there an assumption that that delineator had done this space, or did they intentionally miss a space, or what would you guess?
So the letter that was provided as part of the package that came from the seller indicated that the full 77 acres had been delineated. Why this area was not identified, we're not exactly sure. It's a pretty significant, a significant surprise. You know, it kind of put our office into a little bit of a frenzy for about 3 weeks as we really looked at the viability of the site. So as you can imagine, the impact of building and constructing on that much wetland would be, one, cost prohibitive, but two, you know, it really goes against the grain of what we've really set as some of the baseline environmental aspects of this project. So, you know, we didn't feel like we could come forward and say we should fill, you know, 2 or 3 acres of wetland, pay a gigantic impact fee, and then feel good at the end of the day that we're doing it, you know, right by the environmental aspects of this piece of property. So one of the things that we've done over the last, I guess about 3 weeks, that we've kind of upended our process, and we've really taken a hard look. We showed Jeff, and I think Peter was there. We took a hard look at pretty much every area on the site that was left that wasn't wet. So we took a look at what would happen if we put the school over in that field where that green box is. We took a look at what if we took the top of the hill off and really tried to, you know, get in there and be as sympathetic with the clearing, and those really didn't end up being as viable as we had hoped. So what we ended up doing was we pulled the building pretty significantly to the south, and I'm not sure how many have actually been out to the site, but this is a really great part of this parcel. So we're feeling pretty good about where we ended up. We're in the process of redoing the engineering on the road. As you can see, there's been some really good improvements on that access. We've eliminated kind of that cobra head coming down the hill. So we're thinking that overall, the viability of the site is still there. One of the things I did want to highlight was that kind of that dark blue area, that there will be a small impact, but we're really working hard to pull the building out of that area. Sarah and I have worked over the last 2 weeks after Jack got his initial kind of engineering done on the roadway and the accessway to redesign the front of that building to minimize how much impact we're at. But we're at right around 20,000 square feet of wetland impact, which in the grand scheme of how much we're impacting here is something that I think we can live with and feel good coming to you with and saying that this is viable. We continue to work on the engineering side to minimize that impact. So going forward, I think, you know, we've kind of hit a spot on the site that we're feeling good, both educationally, environmentally, and overall cost-wise. So we're just about ready to roll out all of the, you know, kind of those long-term funding things. We've got some orders of magnitude that they've crept up a little bit on the cost front, but we're still within that ballpark of what we had kind of floated out before. So we're pretty close to rolling out those cost pieces. But before we get too much further into the, you know, complete design of this building, getting the full package together, we wanted to get in front of you to make sure, do you agree that we're in the right track? Is this a good part of the site? Is this still viable with what you know and what we've presented? And then answer any questions that may have come up. You know, this has been a pretty significant change over the last 3 weeks since we've met with you last, and it's really a good time to kind of do that gut check to make sure that we are still on the right path for the district.
I have a quick question with that. Is the drainage, like what's the slope? of the, where the wetland is? Is that water sloping down? Is the topograph coming down into the school, so we're going to be dealing with flooding and those
Right,
type
so
of issues?
the wetlands are the low part of the site.
Okay.
We would be doing some pretty significant improvements on the upward side of that, which is going to pretty much eliminate any of those concerns about flooding.
Okay.
There would be some fill in order to bring the building up to being level. As you can imagine, that blue wing is about 180 feet long, so to flatten that out to a point where we can actually build a building, we've got to do some good grade work in there.
Yeah.
There's about I think a 14 or 15 foot differential between one side of that blue box and the other. So we've got some room to play with that topography out there.
Okay.
As you start to get onto that eastern side of the building, it gets really steep. That's where you kind of come up Walnut Hill, and then you kind of go up and back down to Gray Road. So
Basically the drainage where would be impacted the most is where the driveway or the parking lot area
Yes.
is that we'll have to build up, so.
yeah, we'll
it
have
won't
that built up. And then on site, we're going to be required to do stormwater drainage calculations and all of those components as part of our environmental permitting to get both through the DEP and also to make sure that we're satisfying the planning board in North Yarmouth as well. So.
And the other finger green, is that another drainage?
It is. I think, so the two areas kind of to the southern side of the building are areas that we don't want to get into. Those are two small active streams, and we were out there about a week and a half ago. It's a great part of the site. There's going to be a lot of educational opportunities out on that side, so making sure that we're not impacting any of that southern, kind of that southwestern side of the site is going to be really important. Those are the places where both topography and environmentally, you're going to be able to get kids out there for some great educational opportunities.
And one last question, did you have to shrink the size of the play space or the buildings themselves to fit in that?
No, as of now, we're changing some of the shapes of the building. So the area that in that front is one of the ones that we're taking a really hard look at, trying to kind of reduce how wide that building is as much as we can to minimize that wetland impact. We're going to be into it with the fire lane that's going to be required and some of those things, but we want to try to get the building out of it as much as we can.
Good job. Thank you.
Kyle, just a question?
Sure. I just wanted to ask, and I think probably this is a question from most of us, and it's come from both towns as well, is where else can we build on this property? Do we have an opportunity, if this is somewhere we have to look towards for the future, do we have an opportunity to build onto this building? Can we build another building on that 70 plus acres? Is that an option?
So I think an additional building may be problematic. So, another standalone freestanding building, the only place that would really be viable would probably be somewhere in the field area. Access-wise, we can do that. We can make that roadway work. But one of the things that we like about this location on the site is as you start to push to the south, the topography kind of separates a little bit. It gets a little bit flatter. And we have the opportunity to actually put a substantial wing kind of heading to the south off of, kind of off that southeastern corner where it indents just a little bit. So we actually have
that would be the area for expansion. If
yeah, it's actually a pretty good area on the site to extend out, and it could be as upwards of another dozen classrooms. So this is a great opportunity to really increase the size of this building programmatically if needed.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Yeah, a couple of other things for the board as far as expansion that first of all, the leach field would still go under the field, so there would be no change there. And then, kind of one of the good positive things I think Tyler pointed out, that there is room there to expand in the future another field that could actually be larger. So there is room for expansion there for another field. I am correct.
You are, yeah. Kind of to the eastern part of that green block that's in the upper field area is the rough size of the wastewater system, so your septic system. So everything to the east of that would be available for field work, depending on how far the district wanted to go.
Just related to that, related to that, so if there's wetland between that school building and that leach field area, are you going to run into an elevation issue going towards that leach field through the
Elevation, there will be grading out there to kind of make that up, but we're trying to do all of that transitional element within the parking area, is my understanding on the.
I was just wondering if it would necessitate pumping and other stuff that would add to.
Due to the elevation and where this ended up, we're likely looking at a pump station for at least part of the building. So we would work to minimize that. I know, get the looks from Scott just there, but.
Scott doesn't like that idea.
Sorry, didn't make it. I know, it was Scott's one request. No, well, I guess there was two, no
Gravity
skylights,
feed.
and so there is likely going to be a pump station unless we, find a really creative way of raising the elevation of that first floor, which, as we raise that elevation, it extends the amount of fill that we have toward that wetland side. So it's really a balancing act, unfortunately.
I have a question. 20,000 square feet of wetlands fill, how does that compare to projects of this size, in other projects of this size? Is that a lot?
I'm not sure I have any data for that.
Okay.
I can ask Jack and see if there's a database for that DEP maintains.
I'd be interested if they know, also if DEP or if you folks know general broader environmental impacts of that much wetland fill.
Does anybody, Jason, do you have anything?
I guess, dumb question. Have we ever looked at, because Scott doesn't like pumping up sewer, and I understand that, do we ever look at flipping plopping the building up in the field and putting the leach field down? Is that
Yeah, it actually, it's a little deceiving on this one because the topography's turned off.
Yep.
But as you kind of turn that corner, by the time that we get the grade resolved, as we're coming down the hill, make the turn, get the parent loop, the bus loop, all of those things off, you either end up with a really weird swoop that kind of pushes the parking on the wrong side of the road, or it ends up in that field area where we're trying to put that building. So, it's been a real challenge. Like I said, we actually took a hard look. It was a crazy week when we first had this come in. Jack took that side, Allison took the top of the hill, we moved the building south. The stuff that ended up on kind of the cutting room floor would be pretty surprising. So we really weren't able to get something that we were happy enough to even present on that field side.
The only other thing I would have for Jeff is I asked it before, but can we recoup the costs? I kind of feel like, deliberate or not, this is a bit of a bait and switch that's going to cost us $200,000 or more. Who's on the hook for that?
Well, actually, Tyler, can you answer? So 200 is kind of your worst case estimate, right? If I remember correctly, or has that changed since we talked?
I'm sorry, what's the 200?
You're talking about impact. Are you talking about impact fee, Jason?
I'm talking about, the building having to be moved. Now we're paying an impact fee on wetlands that we didn't know. And not only that, the cost of what Tyler and his crew has been doing for the last 3 weeks, that's significant. Those are sunk costs that we didn't count on based on what we were sold, essentially.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't know who we would hold responsible because I think there's a lot of, I'm not sure who is responsible. There was, I think, communication issues from what I understand, but I think these things happen. Do you have a better estimate of the impact fee, or you?
That 200 is pretty close to where we're looking.
Is it? Okay.
Yep.
All right.
So that's the number that we're carrying in the project budget as of now. It's somewhere around $6 a square foot, I believe. So we're in the 20 to 30,000 square foot range, and then, it's kind of like a lot of things. We're at the very beginning of that piece. We're working really hard to minimize how much that is. But as we start to work on that next level of detail, we'll hopefully shrink it. But there's a chance that it could go up 1,000 here and there, and it's.
But Tyler, we haven't added to your contract. You're still at the same price for concept design. So
we are.
Whatever you've been doing for the past 3 weeks is part of your current contract.
It is.
Thank you.
I like that part.
It's kind of like that first slide that we showed you. We just move on, and everybody's happy, and so. No, as of now, we're doing our best to stay within those ranges. It's been good. I think, we will have some discussions about some additional costs on the wetland delineations and vernal pool side, getting back out there and really trying to refine those limits to make sure that we're in the right spot.
Thank you.
Tyler, I had a question, I think, I don't know, maybe back in January, about the type of field that was going to be put there, and I had asked if we could look into putting a baseball field there.
Yep.
And I think, can you kind of walk me through where the field's going to be? And is it accessible with playground space to play during and run around and use that? And I would hope that we can kind of work that in. So if you can walk me through that.
Yeah, there are two areas that we have identified for both the athletic side and then the outdoor play and learning, and they don't connect. So what we're actually looking at is, if you look at the plan, there's kind of a brownish colored kidney shape on the southern side, and that's where we're looking for all of that active play area. So the outdoor play and learning, playground space, we'll have a field for students' active involvement. It kind of abuts the wood, so we get this nice natural buffer, but a little exploration. The actual baseball field would be on the northern side of the site, adjacent to where the leach field is. And we'll have to do some road work to kind of get over there, but we have the ability to get the larger field in, and possibly a soccer field over there as well, kind of overlapping the outfield.
I think it's a missed opportunity that at playground time, there isn't a wide open space to have those pickup games. I mean, back in the day when MIW, before we had portables there, kickball was where it's at.
Yeah.
I mean, the kickball was it. And we started dropping portables there, and I mean, it's devastating to my freshman that looks back to all those memories. And I get that it's minor, but having that sort of, I mean, you spoke about it earlier, Jeff, at the middle school, those kids play football and soccer and things like that. And I think at this younger age, having that wide open space to figure out how to work together in that team and try to put together, I mean, winters are long, and being able to play in the snow and run around and get that energy out. I hope that we could get something that's accessible closer to the school. It doesn't have to be a full field, but really working that in and having some sort of design with kickball or, you know, that stuff I think is important, at least to me.
And I think we have to find that balance between those wide open spaces and having a direct connection to nature too. That's one of the beautiful parts of this property, is that I think what you're saying is that kidney shape down below is where the current playground is. It butts up to the forest. It has some streams.
Yeah,
it's got
and
all
then
the good stuff.
it kind of wraps around that eastern side of the building. That gray square is about a basketball court size on the outside. So once we get, you know, if we can kind of lock this down, Allison will really start to dial in on some of these things that you're talking about, because it's something that, you know, philosophically on our educational side, we completely agree with.
I mean, I get that there's the woods, but it's not getting out that energy of a 6-year-old. And I think our teachers would appreciate getting that energy out when they're cooped up so much. So I think it's important. Okay.
Thank you. Kevin, do you have anything? Okay. Peter?
No, I just, I don't have anything addition. I think segueing into the next thing, I think there are.
Let's get Tom and make sure
I'm
Tom
sorry.
doesn't have any questions.
Go for it. I'm good, Peter. Segue all you want.
Oh, and then Kevin lied and he has a question.
So so the place where down at the bottom on the eastern side, that's where you're thinking the expandability if you had to add another wing?
Yeah.
Okay. And so if it's 12-ish classrooms, but that would tap us out on this site.
If it's 12 on a footprint, you could go up a floor as well. So we could conceivably get 20-ish classrooms on there, which is a pretty substantial addition here. You know, there would be some other things you'd have to take a look at, you know, athletics, gyms, cafeterias, that type of thing. But I think there's some really good opportunities here for that expansion.
Okay, thank you.
And if that happened, and it's kind of on top of that kidney space, right, the brown space, is the white space at the bottom able to be play space? I mean, is
yes.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not abutting up to something that we can't have then play space. I just don't want us to to say that it's expandable, and then we get into a position like we are at MIW, where
Yep.
we can put a portable on it, but you can't play. So, like, we need all of it, right?
Oh,
And to make sure that we're, as a board, wide open to that, because 10 years down the road, they're going to use our name when we put this forward, that it wasn't expandable, right? And that we didn't have playground space.
Well, now that we're kind of heading in this direction, we'll get the expansion area shown, and then as Allison starts to work through the playground and those outdoor learning environments, we'll make sure that those are well coordinated. It's the same thing. We'll keep the utilities out of that area, try to minimize stormwater.
Right. You don't want to go too far down that road, but we really want to make sure that we are getting the most bang for the buck.
Absolutely, agree.
Can I ask one more question? And this is the question that, I've already asked you directly, but I just want to make sure we all know. We know the delineation needed to be upgraded or updated. Is there any other surprise, do you think, with wetlands on this property that we might not have covered? And I'm just asking as a basic, just to make sure.
We're not expecting that. So after he started seeing this, Jack walked the entire site. I think he was out here for a day and a half between laying out borings for geotechnical. He flagged those areas. We actually had the seller's delineator go back out there. We're thinking that we are likely going to recommend this spring doing a second delineation with a third party. It's just trying to get to that same place, that we're all comfortable that there are no surprises as we move forward. So as of now, we think we have it fairly well covered.
And just one other question. I know you brought up the spring, the idea of the spring that was there. How is that being taken care of?
So as of now, it's a little hard to see on there. It's a kind of a small dot to the northeast of that, kind of the point of the blue. If you go a little further to the right on the corner of that dark green area. There you go, too far. Down.
Oh, yes. So right here. All right.
Yeah, it's over about halfway through the parking lot on the.
That point.
There you go. That's the spring house, and that's something that we actually want to have a lot more discussions community-wise, because the condition of that is somewhat of a hazard now. So we have to do something improvement-wise, but we want to make sure that we're working around it, whether it's in an island space, it becomes a feature, or we do some work to make that a safe piece. But we're doing our best to kind of avoid that area.
Yeah, I would just say that it is a pretty special spot, I think, to some people that have been familiar with the property, and I think if we can do anything to keep it the way it is, we should.
Yeah, we'll have to make it safe. But
yes.
you can kind of see we're trying to stay that 15, 20 feet away from it. Try to have it not be too much of a draw for students. It's not going to be a great educational piece, but we're trying to be as respectful to that area as we can.
That's good. All right, thank you.
Okay, Tyler? Yeah, there are a couple things that, getting back to reality, that there is a very specific process that we have to go through with notification of bond counsel, and you've seen all that good stuff, to approach a June referendum. And I think based on Tyler's testimony, the answers to a lot of the board questions, there's no way, I think, with a straight face that we could, with all these questions that are still out there to be answered, that I would feel comfortable bringing this thing to a June referendum. There's just entirely too many questions still to be answered. So to fire up the next phase of this thing, I am recommending, and I think the Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee have kind of reached the same conclusion, that we need to move this thing out in November, just in case we've got any more little landmines. Although I'm thinking maybe we can peddle some, you're looking for all this revenue stuff, we could peddle the stuff that's Poland Spring, have them bring in the tank trucks and they can roll in the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit there in North Yarmouth, and life will be good. But anyway, I think, but seriously, I think we need to move the thing back to November.
I asked Tyler if he would come with a schedule for both, to be able to see what June and November looks like, just to give the board a little bit of some ideas on that. Do you want to go through that, Tyler, or?
Certainly. Do you have a question before? Or?
I don't agree. I don't disagree with what Peter's saying. Do you agree also, Tyler Barter?
Yeah, I think that we've lost a little bit of time, obviously, kind of redoing the site side on getting our building designed far enough along that we're really comfortable with the numbers. I mean, we've been pushing to try to get this into the referendum in June. We've kind of, and it's nothing that you have to worry about, but we've kind of structured some availability of staff in the office. Like we're ready to go, but we get it. I mean, there's a lot of work still left to be done. There's a communication effort that needs to get out there. We really need to get out in front of, get the numbers in front of Scott and bond counsel in a meaningful way, so he can kind of, I think it was wizardry, right? That the financial wizardry that still needs to happen. So, I think it's, I don't think it's a bad decision, but I think as we go through the two timelines that I put together, I think there's some things that you are going to want to, weigh as you look at those.
Shouldn't be rushed. So.
And if we click back and forth between those two schedules, do both show that? Oh, there's a huge difference.
No, there's a big difference in that little last star. So.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
So if you start with the June referendum, one of the things that is attractive on a spring referendum is that it puts us, in a pretty good spot for bidding a project for a spring start the following year. So between the DEP permitting, design time, getting between the fire marshal, it's usually around a 12 to 14 month process. We have some staffing availability, so we had committed when we looked at this back in last fall to get that out a little bit ahead of time so we could really staff this up, do this in a 10-ish month design window. And that puts you in a really good spot to bid this out in January, get things rolling for contracts, beginning of March, contractors mobilizing as the frost comes out of the ground. It's a really good timeline. It's kind of one of the better ones for us on the design and construction side. So what that does is you kind of get down to looking at beginning construction, pretty much beginning of June, maybe May as we go. We're looking at somewhere around a 24 to a 26 month construction window. That gets you wrapping up construction, beginning of the following summer, building shakeout, get your air quality testing done, and then get the building set up for teachers. So all of the moving. There's a pretty big effort that last summer that will take place. So this gets us into a pretty good spot to be wrapping up construction in July with the June referendum, July of 2025. So one of the things that changes with a November referendum and Maine winters is we would likely push that design time out a little bit for. So if we wouldn't compress the timeline, it doesn't do us a lot of good on that back end to be bidding a project in November, December on the mobilization on the opposite side. The challenge here is going to be that we have an access road and a lot of stuff to get to cut into this building in order to get us back to the site to start construction. So what that likely means is that we're going to be back to bidding again in early January. It would just be January of 2024. I spent some time with Jack today going through this timeline, and one of the things that we can do to help move that process and also be as respectful to the funding source as well is start to do some early bid packages. So do the water line the first summer, the summer of 2023. It puts a lot of pressure on him to get those things designed, permitted, or through the water district on their side. And then try to do the same thing with the access road. So get it to a point where when we're ready to start construction in 2024, that road's been cut, the binder course is down, and we're in a position that a contractor can really roll to the back of the site and get going. The building is still going to take that 2-ish years to get done. So what that really means is that we're going to be wrapping up construction in late spring, early summer of 2026. So losing a year on the opening date is kind of where we're at by that 6-month delay on referendum date. That little note that I've snuck on the bottom, nothing has gotten cheaper, unfortunately, over the past year, and we're not expecting any significant decreases in construction costs. So what we would project is somewhere between that 4 to 7% of escalation as we go forward. So I'm not sure how many keep up on the construction side, but there's been some pretty significant increases material-wise. You know, everyone heard about lumber, but what we're seeing is anything that has volatile chemicals, you know, insulation, all these things that we're really high on for the sustainability and energy side have been going up significantly. And then this is a very site-intensive project. So when we see diesel fuel double in price over the course of 4 months, you know, it's a pretty big increase overall, and that we're doing our best to, you know, adjust our design, be as sympathetic as we can to the site, and try to, you know, really kind of German engineer this thing, you know, Swiss watch it, kind of, so to speak, to make sure that we're being as thoughtful as we can to both the site and the economic side. So, I mean, the reality is that we're looking at probably, you know, conservatively a 5% increase by delaying a year.
Tyler, I appreciated you mentioning the site work, because some of the other projects that we've done here, we've actually bid out the site work prior to the building part of it, and actually accomplished meeting our goal by doing the site work early.
Yeah, I think there's some really good opportunities here. There's pretty heavy utilities just getting to the point where we enter the site. So, you know, doing $1.5 million water extension line project that first summer, not pushing that off, you know, trying to minimize how much of those construction dollars are being escalated could go a long way to help save some of that kind of front end money.
Tyler, can I ask a question? Was there consideration for having the referendum in September or a different date?
No, the only two that I was asked to look at would be June and November.
I'm not sure if you would understand this, but how much would kind of the cost be around that? I know that we've sat in other meetings prior to this and kind of talking about if we had a special referendum and what that cost impact would be.
You mean
do you know roughly, like, to call the referendum? Would you know that's kind of the question?
Yeah, we'd have to work with the towns on that. I mean, right now we share costs based on the referendums. When we have a referendum on each town, we split those costs, but we'd have to look at the total cost of having a referendum.
And do we think that there would be a year, could we get onto the path of that year savings if we did something in September or a sooner date than November?
Yeah, it's possible. I think that, you know, say we did a September date and then compress the design and engineering side a couple months, that gets you to bidding it in maybe July. That's not the worst thing in the world. You know, if we can start getting foundations in the ground before, you know, it turns real bad. I mean, we can do some temporary heat throughout the winter and do foundations all winter. That's not an issue, and it probably is less than a 5% increase to do winter construction than to wait a full year. So I can certainly put together a timeline for that.
I don't know if that's the route that we want to go, but I think it's definitely worth the discussion.
Jason and then Mike.
I think the savings there going that route would be huge if we don't lose that entire year. If you're talking about 5% increase in the total project, I know having just casual discussions with Bill Shane before, there's like $20,000 maybe for an extra referendum if we could make that happen. Maybe Brian actually knows how they just did it. But,
You want to say that in the mic, Allison?
Yeah, I'll take a look at. I mean, it's a good question. We can take a look at what the differential is for winter construction versus.
And there's probably some sort of date where the cutoff is. Like, we got to do it by September 15th, or we're done, and then it flips to the next year, or we have to do it by October 1st. Or I know that really isn't like a finite date, but there's probably some sort of window that you're trying to get to.
Yeah, certainly. But I mean, we've done whole school projects where we've constructed all of the foundations in December to March. It's not fun for concrete guys, but they get it done.
the ultimate goal being that we get in September 25 instead of 26, right?
So, Brian, did you want to answer the question about referendums?
Was that an actual question?
It was.
Okay, so the special, it's called a special town meeting in North Yarmouth, but it was an actual paper ballot vote. Cost us, all in with staff and, all the stuff that we needed. It was about $6,900 to do that. But that was a hand-counted vote. If you bring in the machines, it actually like raises the cost just a little bit because of where you have to get the ballots processed. So I would figure a special election somewhere in the $7,000 range would be a safe bet.
So maybe 30,000 for both towns, overestimating it.
Yeah, I have no, but it's two totally different
Yeah.
like government structures, so I don't.
But that's a value of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Well, then you
I think
have
the
to back up everything that has to be done for preparation for the referendum, because you've got documents and ballots that have to be prepared. There's a number of things that would have to happen all the way back into July.
Oh, definitely.
And, you know, outside of those rules, the piece that scares me is there's got to be an awful lot of community outreach during this. And there's, you know, a week and a half that people really enjoy in Maine, and it's probably at that exact same time.
Yeah.
That's my biggest fear. I don't want to miss a year, but I don't know how many people you get out to spend time and understand the project
Right.
and build consensus.
You don't want to lose the vote. So, yeah, no, so I'm trying to balance this. How do you make it so we're opening hopefully in September 2025 and saving 5%, or not expending the additional 5%, but also making sure that the public is fully aware of this project, and we feel comfortable, and then we, you know, can convince folks in both towns that it is worth their expenditures. So I don't know. This feels this is a complicated balance. I would be really interested in the September timeline. I feel like that gives enough time to do community outreach. It would be a special election. It is generally hard to get people to show up, save for what North Yarmouth just did. So when people are energized, they do come out, and I don't think people would be disinterested in this. So I'm really interested in the September idea, especially if it could bring us to 2025. If it doesn't, then there's no reason to do it. But also just, I think we maybe take a few days, unless Peter, you feel really strongly about this, and I would love for you to explain further, that June is really not a possibility.
Well, I don't think, first of all, Michael, I think that June there's no way. I would not support the referendum. I mean, there's just too many little woolly boogers out there that are in this thing that you would be doing a half-hearted job to do this, and I mean, the September thing is interesting. I mean, part of me says that I would like the maximum number of people to opine on this thing. You know, it's a national election, so we get a true feeling of the communities. It's not one of these things where special interests do that, this, that, and the other. It's a true sentiment of the communities, but as I say, that's more of that's unscientific, that's more feeling than it is scientific. And I think it's a good point that how much energy is out there to do some kind of a campaign in July and August where everybody is on boats at camps or trying to figure out how they're going to pay the tuition of their children. So I mean, I will defer to the board, but I still support November. But I think, in all reality, June is off the table, and if we want to talk about the other ones, but I just think we need some more information. This is, I am still madder in hell that they, you know, that this wetlands thing came up. I mean, but the thing is, it's the old deal. You can whine all you want to, but you got to play the cards that are dealt you. So I think we're trying to do that at this point, and I think they've come up with probably as good a design and as good a location, and I think we've got fields, things, and, you know, if a couple more folks in conical hats and AK-47s don't come out and get us in that area, then I think we're good to go. So I will defer to the board on November or September, and if we can get some minor stuff so we're not investing $400,000 to figure out how September is going to work, and maybe we've got another meeting coming right up. Finance and facilities can get together with information. I mean, that's probably the best thing, is to get a consensus tonight that June is off the table, and then turn finance and facilities and Tyler together to see, and Scott and Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and see if we can come up with something in a couple weeks.
It's a worthwhile exercise to potentially save $4 million, which is be 5%.
Yeah.
I also think we have to, go ahead. Sorry. Well, I just want to say the only thing that we haven't talked about is the cost that, well, one of the things we haven't talked about is the cost of portables for another whole year. And that should be part of, when we're looking at these different things, that should be part of. Because kids are not just coming in 2025. We have them, they're coming every day. They're coming in September. We still have to teach them, we have to provide environments for them, and so I think we have to think about what is school going to look like from now until those doors open as well, when we're looking at these timelines for our current students.
Well put.
And that their learning environment will be better than a portable is also to support what you're saying.
Yes, yeah. Go ahead, Vanessa.
I have a question for Tyler. You mentioned about a third party coming in and surveying the land or looking at the land, and is that on the table? Are we still doing that?
It sounded like
it just feels like it's a little unclear of our confidence level to the public of the site. That we got one information here, another information here, and mentioning a third party to come in and really nail down that this is going to be viable.
You know, we defer to the architects on that, whether they think it's something they feel like needs to be done, right?
Yeah, I think that is something that we would like to have done. It's not something that is in our current contract, but I think it would be money well spent. We've actually reached out to another entity that we've used a lot, and someone that we would be looking for the vernal pool study, which we have to do this coming April anyways, and someone that would help us on the permitting side on the back end as well. So it's something that we would like to talk to Jeff and Scott about to make sure that everyone's in agreement that we can get that done.
Just instinctually, I feel like that we're going to have a couple more pop-ups on this site that I think a third party is going to be money well spent for this
Agreed.
site.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think I totally understand the idea of saving some money on this, and also getting the students in this building sooner, a year sooner. Is definitely an interest, but I think it's balancing what's already been said is one of them. Is there something that's going to come up? There's 76 acres here that we're dealing with. Is something going to come up that is going to make it more problematic for us to make a September referendum? I feel like November would be more comfortable. It would also give us 2 months. We want this project to pass, and I'm not feeling everybody is disengaged until about the first week of school, really. We have kids that come back for athletics mid-August as people start kind of spilling back in. But to have 2 months where we can really talk about this project and get people to support it and understand it and feel like they have information, I don't feel like we can do that in 3 or 4 weeks. I am very concerned about the timeline for that. But it is up to the board at the end. There's some compelling reasons why you would want to as well hold a September referendum. That's,
So I think at this point, what Jeff and Tyler really need is kind of consensus that June's off the table, and that we would like to look at November, which you've already provided for us, but also what September could possibly look like.
Plus the engineering.
And continue the engineering. Yep.
Yeah, we're not going to take our foot off the gas on the engineering. We still have a lot of catch up to do from the last few weeks, and So, I mean, we're gonna keep going regardless of which direction you go, so that we're wrapping our work up as quickly as we can.
Okay.
How long, Tyler, would it take you for your team to come up with a September timeline?
A couple days.
Oh, all right. I was thinking a couple weeks.
Probably by the end of the week.
Okay, that's good to know. So I like Peter's idea of convening facilities and finance, because it is a money piece too, and I think both groups need to kind of look at it, and then, maybe making a decision or bring it back to the board, or however we want to do it. I have a little bit of time on that. I do like that idea of just kind of weighing the details a little bit more.
I think there's some things I'm going to drop into that timeline too, as far as some of the things around the referendum. So.
Yeah, we should have this as a big picture.
I can wash my hands of it July 1st.
So I think, if anybody, do we feel like we've accomplished our needs for the?
I think so. It sounds like,
Yeah.
so the June piece, everybody's over.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler,
Good
you're welcome
job.
so much.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler.
Okay, so to keep things moving along, we will move into superintendent's report. Really Goes Green plan revisions.
We'll try to keep this really brief, because I know the night is getting late. So there's so many things that will be in the blog. I could have probably done 3 or 4 blogs this week, honestly, because there are so many amazing things going on in the district right now, and I just couldn't even keep up with everything. There was a unified basketball game at the middle school. I had a chance to attend. It was just packed. I have not seen that many people in one of our gyms for a while, so it was awesome. And the kids just had a tremendous amount of fun, and they played Old Orchard Beach that particular day. We've had a lot of fun across the district with Pi Day, which is 3.14, so March 14th. And a lot of the teachers were great sports, and our administrators as well. We had a couple that took pies in their face, but these are some pictures of Heather Daigle, she's a math teacher, Shannon Montgomery at the middle school, and Ben Caswell, all were 3 of many who received pies in the face from students. And really, it was for Make-A-Wish Foundation. It was a school fundraiser, but the staff really did a great job. This is Doug Pride's, I can't remember what, it might be his calculus class, or pre-calc. They actually made pie.
Calculus.
As part of the pie, and then they ate it. So Mr. Pride is eating it along with his students there. A lot of congratulations, just so much going on, it's great. I had neglected in my last blog to include the Alpine ski team, which they also had a great season, and they forwarded me a picture. I just want to congratulate that whole team and Ruth Weeks, especially for her 4th place in the slalom at the Western Maine. So that was great. So we've had both of our students who were semifinalists are now finalists. There's a process that they go to. They have both been notified now that they are finalists. So if you remember the story in the fall, they were semifinalists. Now they are actually finalists. So Matthew Gilbert and Lev Kifune, congratulations. That's a huge, huge honor. There are just so many students in the United States that get to this point, so it's tremendous. Every year we always seem to have 2 or 3 students that get to that point. The treble chorus, madrigal singers, and the full high school concert chorus. We've had a lot of concerts recently. This was one of the more recent ones. Mrs. Bailey and her crew there. And also Mr. Rollins and his crew with the jazz band, the jazz combo. We're performing at the State Jazz Festival up in Hamden, and we had a lot of students involved in that. I won't read all the names, but and Kevin is here as well. So I think this is our GCA, but we had to have a picture in here, so I had to throw one in. Congratulations to 5th grader Jimmy Boston, whose block print Maine Agriculture is now being displayed at the Portland Museum of Art for Youth Art Month as part of their exhibit. And honors biology, they started studying lactose, and actually I think they use students as their patients, other students as their patients, but then this is Gian Tazio's honors biology. They were kind of testing students to see if they were lactose persistent versus lactose intolerant. I learned something. So we have 3 students here who were 3 of many that were involved in testing. The Greeley Goes Green revisions, I don't know if you want me to go through. Tyler's shaking her head, no. I did forward this plan to the board, and if you approve, as it was amended, it would basically follow. I know I was asked by the board to do that for this meeting, and so I did do that. If there's any questions, I'd certainly like to answer them. And I put this in here to thank Don Foster for making sure that this got into installed. This is one of our very few fountains that we had to actually replace completely because of the lead water testing, and this was in the library at the high school, and this got replaced. In the middle school, I don't have a picture.
We just did 177 faucets. Don stayed overnight and tested 177 faucets.
The middle school testing, as Scott is just reminding me, is actually happening right now. We did the high school and the Wilson School were completed back in the fall, but the middle school is being done right now. But anyway, this is one of those, and I know this is Mrs. Parkinson, the librarian in the high school, said this is a very popular item, more popular than the books right now. So,
Okay, thank you so much.
That's my report. And I don't know if there's any questions about the GGG revisions, but
I have just one brief one.
I figured there'd be 1 or 2 questions. But
So I guess, is there anything new? I did browse through it and looked at the red lining and updates. Is there anything that's more restrictive now, different than what we discussed last on March 7th? Nothing?
No, there's nothing more restrictive. It's literally, I went through and redlined
Okay.
everything out.
And can we soon get to a point where we archive that document and turn it into like a 1-page, here's the difference between now and February of 2020, sort of just break it down into, it's very simple. And
Yeah, I'd
get
like to
rid of
retire
document.
the GGG plan.
Yeah.
I was planning not to retire it until the end of the school year, but I definitely want to retire it. There's going to be pieces of it that will carry on, because it's just good practice that we've learned.
Right.
Just good stuff that we should be doing all the time that we instituted during COVID.
Yep.
And I will literally remove stuff and probably submit a very brief plan. I'd like to work with the nurses to make sure that they're in the loop on that. But yeah, my idea is to retire this plan at the end of the school year.
Sooner the better. It's 26 pages. It's a bit overwhelming.
It is. And a lot of it is that we've just kind of stricken through things
Yep.
and left it. All those stricken things are going to come out as well. So
That's it.
it will get shorter.
Thank you.
I have an important question. Why did you not get pied, Jeff?
Well, it's funny because Mrs. Trebelcock at the middle school, she did kind of mention it to me, and I realized she was kind of asking me. I said, oh, that's nice, you're getting pied too? And I was waiting for her to invite me, but I didn't get invited. So next time.
Yeah, you just signed yourself up.
I have been in the dunk tank at the high school, but I haven't gotten pied. I did think about it, and then of course it slipped my mind.
You should nominate the board next year, too, to get pied.
Huh?
You should nominate the board to get pied.
I love
I'm sure
the
there's
idea.
community members who
I
would love to.
There's always a 3.4, but 3.4 isn't always on a weekday, but of course they'll have a day to observe it, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you for those updates. Thank you for the revisions on the plan. I look forward to having that retired. Let's move into committee reports. Finance, Kevin?
April 4th, take a look at the documents that you have, line them out, and if you do have questions that anybody can address in advance, please feel free to reach out.
Ann is not here for policy. I don't know if anybody else would like to make an update.
Yes. On behalf of Ann asked Vanessa and I to just do a quick update to note that the policy committee has been diligently meeting on a number of policy issues. One in particular is on the remote meeting policy for the board of directors. We instituted that obviously via COVID, via emergency measures through COVID. We're now out of that, but there is potential need to at least be responsive to utilizing remote possibilities. There's a lot that goes into it though, so it's a rather complex policy, and so we got a lot of feedback. We thought we had something simple, and our lawyers said, no, you do not. So that is going through the process.
Thank you. Facilities Facilities, Peter, do you have anything?
Nothing additional.
Okay. Curriculum, Jennifer.
No change from last.
Cool. Communications, Mike?
There's just a lot of work that is about to get underway with regards to the building. That's the big item.
Equity, we had our last meeting last Wednesday. We broke out into groups, did some breakout group talking about how we can collect stories around equity from our district, and did some planning towards our next kind of open to the public community event, which will be on April 12th. Student reports.
Yeah. Many students have rejoiced at the fact that masks are now optional. Feels like things are finally getting back to normal. Spirit Week. Spirit Week is upon us, and lots of students are excited. If not about the school spirit, then about the 2 half days we get this week. We had a big turnout today for nap day, and tomorrow is Adam Sandler Day. And we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Avery. Madison?
Yeah, basically what he said. But the only thing that I have to add is about my comments at the last meeting about the bullying problem at the high school and most school. I did get to talk to Mr. Gray. He has been in contact with Ms. Trebilcock, and I completely will butcher the last name of the vice principal or assistant principal. Levitier?
Law Revere.
Law Revere. Oh, yeah. I thought there were T's in there. I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, it's 9:30. You guys can't get mad at me for that.
It's like Paul Revere.
It's fine. Anyways, that is going to get worked on. Hopefully I'll be able to actually bring something to the board regarding it soon. But for now, it's in the works.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you both for bringing your honesty to our conversations here, but also recognizing that there's different places where we have to have these conversations, and sometimes they're best held with your direct administrator. And I think based on the junior privileges, I think Avery can speak to how beneficial it was to work directly with his.
Yeah, it was great. I'll talk a little bit more about this in the discussion for the junior privileges, but yeah, it was great. I think a lot of times it can be overlooked, the actual process of changing a policy on different levels within the district, whether that's like within just a department of a school or at, the principal's level, or actually like the more important things being at the board level. And I think we can kind of lose sight. I think it's really easy to lose sight of those different levels of delegation in leadership.
But yeah, I'm planning to talk to him again soon to hopefully talk about some other things that I've noted and been discussed or talked to about.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you both. I don't believe we have anything for ad hoc committees. Nope. All right, so move into items for action. Would somebody like to make a motion for the junior privileges proposal?
Approve proposal to begin junior privileges? Or the recommended vote is to approve the proposal to begin junior privileges as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Did you want to add something to this?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I've been an advocate for junior privileges for a while. And I think junior privileges can be a great tool to encourage academic success, promote students being independent, and also reward the students who have been academically inclined so far. But I also think that if this isn't implemented correctly, it can do the opposite and have like a very negative effect on students. This is a school. It's here to teach kids, not just to give them privileges to go out and roam the open world. When implementing junior privileges, you want to do it in a way that encourages students to take advantage of the free public education that we have to offer here. And we also don't want to put a burden on students' grades or teachers who have to feel the impact of those students' terrible grades. And I had a great meeting with Mr. Gray, great long hour-and-a-half meeting about this, where we kind of discussed what junior privileges entails. And there's a lot of moving parts that you don't see to this. I don't know how long their presentation was. It felt like maybe 3 minutes. But there's a lot of different things, whether that be the RSO, keeping track of students coming in, coming out, making sure everyone's safe, different teachers, making sure that all students are still on track to graduate. And yeah, there's a lot you don't see, and they really have not left, they've left no stone unturned with this. Mr. Gray and me have put a lot of time. It's very apparent. And I also want to remind us all that this is like, we're doing a trial of this. It's going to run, I think, from April something to the end of the year. It's not, you know, now and forever junior privileges. But yeah, I think my last point that I'll make, because I've been talking for a while, is that a lot of juniors already just leave. They already just go out to lunch. They already just like sign into study hall and then just leave.
You shouldn't. That's probably not something.
Sorry, guys. But by doing this, you can actually keep track of where the students are going.
Awesome.
So.
Avery, good job.
Yep.
Thank you.
Put in the work. You
Yep.
did it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yes, further discussion. Mike.
I feel like we should give consideration to, and I don't want to go with the process, but the school board members should automatically get privilege, the student school board members.
Thank you.
That's a nice addition to the final plan, right, after the pilot.
What was Mia's name again that spoke earlier?
Mia Netland.
Mia Netland.
Yeah, I think that the students should be very happy to have somebody like that representing her in public. She did
Good point.
a very fine job doing that.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Seeing none opposed? Nice work. All right, and then a motion for the second reading of the 22-23 school calendar.
I'll do it. To approve the 2022 to 2023 school calendar as presented.
Second.
Any discussion here?
I have a question. Jeff, has there been any changes from the first reading?
No, there hasn't.
The only thing that I will ask, and it'll be after my time, but if maybe at the beginning of the year, Jeff, you could schedule the building administrators to talk about what the professional development days will be as part of this calendar.
Yes.
I think the community would be very interested in knowing what that is and why they're held in the way that they are.
Yes, and that's actually, we should just put it in the board calendar now that I think about it. We've done the presentation every once in a while here, but we should just do it on a regular, annual basis. I like the idea of doing that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? All right, thank you.
I voted for it my first time.
All right, and then, yep,
Okay.
looking for a motion. Go ahead.
A motion to approve the updated Greeley Goes Green plan as presented.
Second.
And any discussion here? It seems like we already have it. All in favor? Thank you.
Tyler, I want to jump in and make an
Yeah, go for it.
additional motion.
Go for it.
I move that the MSAD 51 board collaborate with the Cumberland Town Council and North Yarmouth Select Board to explore a significant solar energy project, which may include the creation of a joint committee.
Second.
Any questions or discussion?
Does Jeff need to catch up?
Fran
wrote it
will,
down.
she'll watch the video, and if she doesn't like my notes. So.
The only thing that I would ask is where we had those meetings a few years back with the town of Cumberland and the Action Committee as well as our council explaining what was permissible for us to do under our statutes.
Right.
I think that would be important to have those folks join
Right.
us as well.
Yes.
So that we don't go down a path that we can't support.
Right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Okay. All in favor?
Oh, did someone second it?
Oh, I thought-
Second.
Peter did. Peter did. Peter did.
Okay. All in favor? Thank you.
Do you want me to do the last one?
Yes, please.
A motion to enter executive session to discuss a personal matter pursuant to State Statute 1 MSRA 4056A.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. We go to the conference room?